IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Thursday. NFL Draft is tonight. We got the Blue-Gold Game on Saturday. Man, this is going to be a really, really fun show today, Brian, and that's exactly what we're talking about. So in part one of today's show, obviously the 95th annual Blue-Gold Game kicks off this Saturday inside of Notre Dame Stadium. So we're going to be previewing that, talking about, the particulars of the game, what we want to see on both sides of the ball. And then, Brian, as we know, the 2026 NFL Draft kicks off tonight, first round. And we are very, very confident that there's going to be at least one Notre Dame player. So we're going to be talking about that, our other thoughts on the draft, and really looking forward to diving into that. And then we're going to wrap up today's show, man, by talking about the SEC. What we're going to start doing here over the next couple of weeks is talking about the different conferences now that they're getting out of spring, and spring training is coming to a close for all teams across the country. And so today, we're going to look at the SEC, talk about some key storylines, some teams that we like, and then some teams that we still have questions about as we leave spring. So, Brian, we got a loaded show coming today, man. I'm excited.
Yes, I can't wait. You know what's funny, Trev? I've said all the time, I don't watch the NFL that much. I don't. Yeah, maybe I'll start watching again someday. I just don't right now. I still love the draft. I still watch it every year. I still – I didn't make a mock draft this year. I started to last night, and I was like, I don't have time for this. I have so much other work to do. I have breakdowns to do and all this other kind of stuff. But I absolutely love the draft. And I'm upstairs with Ange, and before we start the show, and she's like, we need to watch Draft Day. She loves doing that. She loves watching the movie Draft Day before the draft. And she's like, I know it's not really how it goes. She's like, and she starts telling me like why she loves the draft. And she's like, she's like thinking about Jeremiah and all the hard work and just everything, and his dreams are coming true. And she's like starting to cry, and it's just like, I love the fact that I'm married to a woman that's like bummed that we couldn't finish watching Draft Day together because I had to do a show. Like, it was just her idea. And she's like, are you okay if I go back and start it over and watch it all the way through? I'm like, sure, babe, go ahead, And it's like a cheesy movie, but I love doing it before the draft. But I absolutely love the NFL draft, Trev. And it is, it's fun, it's entertaining and all that, but it is just, you think about it, we were athletes when we were younger, and, we played football, and of course we would have loved to have been good enough to play at that level. But you can, even if you weren't, and we weren't, clearly, you can think of what it was like when we were kids, and we still had that dream of that. And now these young men get that opportunity to live that out. And it's just such a cool thing and a cool experience. And, as we get to know these kids to varying degrees over their lives and tenures, and obviously Jeremiah is a young man who committed on the Irish Breakdown show, and to just watch his growth as a football player and as a young man, and see what his family has gone through. Like, not bad, just the way it goes to watch their son grow from being a young boy to now he's, getting ready to become I shouldn't say he's become a millionaire, but even more of one than maybe he already is with the NIL deals he's got the last 2 years, but more so just, the work that's gone in, the sacrifices that these families have put in, whether it's when they're young and, just taking them to different camps and events and all this kind of stuff, and watching them play, and to see that carry it out is just an amazing thing. And then she's like, and this is why I love this time of year, because, the draft, and then on Saturday we get to watch these kids that get to run out of the tunnel for the first time. It's like, my wife's getting all super sentimental, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good time of the year. So I'm excited about it, Trev. And so we get to talk draft today. We get to talk about the Blue-Gold Game. We get to talk a little SEC football. Man, I'm super fired up about this. And if you're an Irish Breakdown member, you have a couple hours here, because at around 5 o'clock, I'm going to lock the thread down. But we're having a little fun mock draft sort of contest at Irish Breakdown. So if you're a member, you go to the board and you make a mock draft, 1 to 32. You can project trades, whatever you want to do, and you get certain points. So like if you pick the number one pick right, Raiders take Fernando Mendoza number 1, you get a point for the player being taken by the Raiders. You get a point for the player being taken in that spot. If you say, hey, I think Jeremiah Love's going to be number 4 to the Titans, but let's say the Chiefs trade up to number 4, you still get a point for him going number 4, but you don't get the point for the team. Or let's say you have, the Cardinals picking him at 3, but they trade out to number 7 and they still take him at 7, you'd still get a point for the Cardinals taking him. You wouldn't get a point for the slot. If you predict a trade, you get points for that as well. And then the winner gets some free IB. Well, actually, first place, second place, third place, fourth place, and fifth place all get some free IB merch. If higher you've ranked, the more IB merch that you get. So if you are a member and you want to have some fun, you don't have to be an NFL draft expert. This is meant to be fun. We've already got, I think, 4 or 5 pages worth of mock drafts on there, Trev, which was flipping awesome. So did you make one by chance, or are you too busy doing like all the other work that
I would love to sit down and do one, but it would have been very surface level, man, and I haven't had the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. That's kind of how I was. I got to pick 4, and I was like, dude, I don't have time to go through all this, but it was awesome, and I was glad everybody did that. But going to be an absolute blast of a show today, Trev. And next week's going to be a lot of fun, too. We'll obviously recap the draft. We're going to take a first look at next year's draft. We're going to do a post-spring position-by-position breakdown the next couple weeks. I'm excited about what we got going on here at Irish Breakdown these next couple weeks. It's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Let's dive into the Blue-Gold Game preview here, man. And now, obviously, this is the 95th annual, and one of the things that I love that Notre Dame's doing, there's several programs across college football that are electing to go away from traditional formats, or some that are just doing away with it entirely. And so for another year, we have the opportunity to see these guys, and it's going to be the first time we've seen them in a game-like setting since November 29th, the last year when they played Stanford on the road. So it's awesome. I know there's a lot of fans who this is their one and only opportunity to go see the boys play inside of Notre Dame Stadium. So before we get started into that, just wanted to put that out there. I'm happy that Notre Dame is one of the teams remaining to continue on their spring game, and I'm excited to be up there with you on Saturday inside of that stadium because, man, you guys know there's no better place to be on a Saturday when there's football going on than on that campus in South Bend. So very excited.
Yeah.
Very excited.
And we're going to do a post-game show after the spring game. Trev's going to go to his dad's house instead of coming here because last time he came here, he tried to stage a coup at the beginning of the show. So, but no, in all seriousness, Trev, it's going to be a lot of fun. And, I think that's where we want to kick things off. Obviously, we're going to have a lot of fun talking about the NFL draft, but diving into the Notre Dame spring game is obviously priority numero uno because that's the driver. And I'm thankful that Notre Dame is continuing this. I thought after last year's spring game, there was a chance that they weren't going to have one this year. And there hasn't been talk about that. So I'm happy about that. I've said before, I don't care about the format per se. I just care about them doing something entertaining and giving the fans something to cheer about, watch, evaluate. Some fans, this is it's like $10 to $12 for a ticket. Well, sometimes that's all people are able to do, or it's like, hey, fall's tougher time for us. So I think it's awesome. Be tens of thousands of people there. No tailgate for IB, by the way. But very much looking forward to being able to see them perform. And, again, if they want to do something different and not play a 4-quarter game, that's fine too. I really don't care. I just want to see the team compete and work out and put on a show for the fans. And I'm very glad that Notre Dame is doing that again this year. Very, very glad.
Some of the particulars of the spring game before we dive into kind of what we want to see. First and foremost, it's streamed exclusively on Peacock. You can watch that. Coverage starts at 2 p.m., probably a little before for some sort of pregame. Or what you guys can do, I heard Sean Steyers talking about it last night, you can listen to the radio call on Sunny 101.5 FM, where our Sean Steyers and Vince and Jesse will be doing kind of like the analysis there. So, or if you watch it on Peacock, you can listen to Tony Simeone, and Ian Book is on the call on Peacock. So either one sounds like it's going to be a fun dynamic listening to Notre Dame's spring game. Again, 2 p.m. Now, obviously, it's a spring game. FanDuel doesn't have any spreads out for that. I know traditionally we talk about what the spreads are and what's looking like what, but obviously for a spring game, there's not going to be any. But it's going to be a solid one. You got offense versus defense, something that makes a lot of sense because of the depth on both sides of the ball. It'd be really hard to draft individual teams given the state of, say, like the linebacker room or the running back room, things like that.
What? What's funny, Trev? It's usually the lines that you have a tough time with this. Usually it's like, we don't have enough offensive linemen. We've got to have guys wearing green jerseys. Like this time it's like, dude, they could easily go like 2 deep on both lines. No problem with 2 teams. Now it's like, hey, we've only got 3 quarterbacks and one of them missed the jersey scrimmage. We've only got 2 scholarship running backs. We've only got 5 healthy scholarship linebackers. It's like, receiver, O-line, D-line, DB, Notre Dame would be fine, going two teams. But I like it this way anyway because, I mean, the draft is fun. I guess. I mean, I get it. Players seem to love it. But for a fan and for us as analysts, I'd much rather see the starting offensive line getting reps together and the number 2 offensive line getting reps together as opposed to some hodgepodge collection of these linemen that have never taken a snap together before this week. I want to see CJ Carr throwing to all of his receivers. Remember a couple years ago, it's well, yeah, that guy did well, but look who he was throwing to compared to the other guy, because this guy had this players and that players and all that. We're going to get to see them all perform and play together. And I think that creates a lot of competition. And I think that you're going to get a lot more feistiness from the players if it's O versus D, as opposed to this collection of guys are on the gold, this collection of guys are on the blue and going about it that way. I think it creates for a better environment. And yes, the scoring situations is different and it's not real scoring, but it's a freaking spring game. I don't care if it's real scoring, come up with a system that allows it to be competitive and, and go have some fun and play some ball. But I think you're going to get a lot more out of evaluating a spring game like this as a coach and then us as analysts if they do it like this. Even if CJ Carr only plays 2 series, and I don't know, he could play the whole game. I mean, you can't hit him. I don't know why you wouldn't play him a little bit. But there's things you can absolutely learn in a game like this when you're playing this way, even if it's just for a half. Second half running clock. I would imagine we still have the running clock and all that other kind of stuff in the second half. But I'm very pleased with the format that they got. Very pleased.
As am I. There's going to be a lot of things that we're going to be evaluating, and then obviously, before we dive into either side of the ball here, Brian, want to see good health. You want the guys to be competitive. You want to see them out there having fun. Because, again, this is their first time in a game-like situation since they played Stanford back in November of last year. So you want to see them out flying around, having fun. But if you're two guys like us, you're really excited to see and start to evaluate some of that younger talent. To Brian's point, I don't know how much we're going to see of CJ Carr. Now, some of that could depend on the health of Blake Hebert and what that looks like for him. If he's good to go, then maybe we don't see CJ Carr as much. But if he's not, then maybe they don't want Noah Grubbs playing for 45 of the 60 minutes.
Like we saw remember we saw that with Drew Pine a couple years ago when he had to run back and forth. And this makes it easier if you only have 2 quarterbacks too, Trev. That was just miserable watching poor Drew. I felt so I did too. Finish and he had to sprint all the way down to the other side of the field to be with the net. Where now it's just dude, re-rack it. It's the second team, third team, re-rack it. Drew's back out there or Noah's back out there if Blake can't go. So yeah, it'll be fun to watch. I'm looking forward to it. But there's things that we're going to be looking forward to, Trev, obviously, as we dive into this and I think one of the things I want to say first and foremost before we start is you can make 2 mistakes as a coach, as a player, or as a fan when you talk about a spring game. Mistake number 1 is to pretend like it means absolutely nothing. There's zero value in a spring game. None whatsoever. And my whole thing is there's certainly value. Am I making okay, so-and-so was winning this job until the spring game? He outperformed this other guy for 14 practices, but so-and-so did better in the spring game, so that guy's now going to start. That is okay, that's an overreaction another way. But you can't tell me that watching kids get in the stadium in front of tens of thousands of fans on TV, competing against each other, you can't tell me that there's no value to get out of that. There's absolutely it's a part of the process of developing a team. There's no question that. Now, the other extreme that people need to avoid is making too much of the spring game. And as I said, so-and-so outplayed so-and-so, so so-and-so is going to now start. When in reality, guys, the last 14 practices, it wasn't even close. So I think that's something that that you need to be careful of in either direction. Don't ignore what happens, but also take it in context of the entire spring, but also don't put so much on it to where you got people saying I remember the whole offseason of 2015, just constantly having conversations about, I had made a comment with doing a show with Lou that if Malik Zaire goes down, that Notre Dame's still going to be okay. because Deshaun Kaiser's a good quarterback. And of course, it's like, did you watch him in the blue gold game? He was terrible. And it's just like, oh, okay, I guess we'll see, and then because it's like, guys, it doesn't matter. Nate Montana won the MVP one year. It doesn't matter. Like in regards to like this big, huge thing, we shouldn't it doesn't matter. You can't overreact to it. And so those are the two extremes that I think we all should be, cognizant of making that mistake of overreacting or underreacting, and just saying it's all part of the whole evaluation process.
Very good disclaimer, and I'm with you completely. I've had to live in the gray sometimes with that as, sitting in this chair and as a fan, because I've been going to blue gold games every year since I was like 9. I get it. I'm with you completely, man. Let's dive into the offense and talk about some things that we want to see. And it starts with the guys up front. You mentioned how the offensive line, you don't have the problem this year of, the players decide to draft and divvy up into different teams. But this is a new look offensive line for Notre Dame. You have Will Black stepping in at left tackle, Anthony Knapp getting kicked to the interior, Gerby Lambert's out at right tackle, and Sullivan Absher's in at right guard. So this is going to be really our final opportunity. And for the fans in attendance, this will be their first time in person being able to see what this lineup is. So a lot to evaluate there. Excited to see how they finish spring.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about what do we want to see on offense, this is it. Like getting a chance to see the offensive line one more time, kind of play together. What kind of lasting impression are they going to leave on us? When you look at what they did in the Jersey scrimmage last week and then what they do in this game, like, are they able to run the ball? Are they able to protect the quarterbacks? Or, like, what's it going to look like? What's the defense going to throw at them? And then how are they going to handle that? And then that could be schematically or personnel wise or whatever the case may be. Like, I don't know if they're going to go one, like a lot of times this spring, they've gone 1 versus 2s and 2s versus 1s, like first team offense against the second team defense and vice versa. And they've done some 1-on-1s too, but like a lot of the times it's we've also seen 1s versus 2s. How do they do that in this game? Is it just 1s versus 1s? Do they mix it up? Is it 1s versus 1s this series, 1s versus 2s the next? I don't know the answer to that, but it's going to be very interesting to see how they do. But when you look at the offensive line, Trev, I want to see the cohesiveness. I want to see, it's only been a week, but I want to see if there's been any kind of, what did Anthony Knapp and Will Black learn watching film of the Jersey scrimmage about their need to communicate a little bit better, or just did more reps just make them better? Because that's going to be a big thing, is those guys have just got to get more reps together. Because when it's good, it's really good. But, obviously they've only been practicing next to each other for a month, and Anthony Knapp's learning a new position. And technically, Will Black's relearning a position he hadn't really played since high school. Don't want to keep beating that dead horse, but, that's another thing. So I'm not surprised by it's not a bad thing, but just seeing how they grow. Are there any young linemen that kind of finish on a strong note? What does Matty Augustine do? Does he play in a way where it's like, dude, yeah, Will Black's projected to start right now, but Matty's charging hard, or is it Cam Herron that's like, hey, Joe Otting's this, or is it Joe Otting saying, hey, like I deserve a chance to battle for this thing when Ashton Craig comes back? Those things are all fascinating too, and this is going to be the first chance for Notre Dame fans to see Will Black at left tackle, and also to see Grayson McHugh at left tackle. Those two kids are very bright futures. You're going to get a chance to see Gerby at tackle. You're going to get a chance to see the improvement that Sullivan Absher's made, hopefully. So they're all things that I'm excited to see.
I'm with you. I love talking offensive line play, and I'm excited to see what they do. Matty Augustine was a player that I mentioned in an article I have coming out tomorrow about some players to watch in the blue gold game. Very interested to see how somebody who's been coined as, next guy in at multiple positions performs and where they line them up. Going to be fascinating to watch. But Brian, offensive line isn't the only position group that we're paying attention to. The other one's going to be wide receivers. Very interested to see what they do in the blue gold game. Can they finish off strong in the spring with a really good performance on Saturday? And within that, there's going to be some players that I'm keeping an eye on more so than others. To the point that we talked about earlier, there's nothing that Jordan Faison's going to show me on Saturday where it's like, oh yeah, giddy up, guys. Like, this is about to be a big year for him, because we all believe that to be true. But there's some younger wide receivers in that room that I'm really looking forward to seeing. And Saturday's kind of their final opportunity. And now first opportunity to do it in front of the Notre Dame fans. Excited to see it.
Yeah. Look, it's been a great spring so far, Trev. And I don't think anything that happens in the blue gold game is going to necessarily tell us, okay, this is going to be a top 3 receiver room, nor should it be like, okay, same old, but it would be nice for fans who are skeptical of the receivers, understandably so, to get a chance to kind of see them finish the spring off very well and go out there and make some plays and have some fun. This is the first chance that Notre Dame fans are going to, in person see Mylan Graham. So now again, some of these kids we talk about may end up not playing. We don't know the answer to that. There's always kids that get announced the day of the game, the day before the game. Oh, by the way, so-and-so has a minor sprained ankle, and so he's not going to play. Because honestly, if you sprained your ankle and you're minorly injured, don't play in the spring game. Like, there's no reason for a kid to push it in the spring game. Any kind of minor joint, muscle, anything beyond a bruise or like a sprained of something that's just minor, of something that's not a big deal, you don't play. So we don't know that. But so we're just going to talk about kids that we think are going to play, or the guys we saw in the jersey scrimmage. But like, it's the first chance to see Mylan Graham in a Notre Dame uniform. It's going to be the first chance for Notre Dame fans to see Bubba Frazier and Caden Finley and Devin Fitzgerald in a Notre Dame uniform. Is Cam Williams, is he able to kind of leave the spring on a positive note? What about Micah Gilbert and his battles with Leonard Moore? Can he go out there and make some plays? All those type of things are aspects that we want to see. And how do the receivers look as a unit? But who makes that lasting impression going into the spring as the pass catchers? Because we have, like, Micah Gilbert's going to play, but is he the starter? Is he the number 2? Is he a movement piece? Like, Mylan Graham's going to play. Is he a starting Z? Is he going to be moving around to X? Does he play some boundary? What about Elijah Burris? Like, those things are all some, question marks. Yeah, this guy's going to be in the rotation, but is he the number 2 or is he the number 5? Those are all things. Does the rotation stop at 5 or does it go to 6? Well, that might be dependent on, how well Cam Williams performs or Elijah Burris performs, some guys like that, Bubba Frazier. And are they able to make some plays in a spotlight? And it's not as big of a spotlight as it'll be on September 6th in Lambeau Field, but it's still a bigger spotlight than playing in an empty indoor facility where there's nobody in the stands. So I'm excited to see that, and I'm hoping that the receivers are able to end the spring on a real positive note.
I am as well. Elijah Burris is a player that I have my eye on tomorrow. There's obviously been a lot of videos coming out. People talk about Bubba Frazier and Devin Fitzgerald, rightfully so. A lot of attention going to Mylan Graham. Very curious to see what somebody like an Elijah Burris does tomorrow, and if he can leave a strong, lasting impression on the coaching staff and the fans as they get ready to leave spring. Let's talk about the quarterbacks, Brian. And this one's a little bit of a different conversation because, one, we don't know the availability of Blake Hebert. We don't know what capacity we're going to see CJ Carr. The one confident I am saying is we're going to see a lot of Noah Grubbs tomorrow, which personally I'm very excited about because there has kind of been this notion this offseason that he's kind of starting to fly under the radar. He's better than what some people expected, even though he won the state championship on a Hail Mary, was Mr. Football in the state of Florida because of, the arrival of Teddy Gerard in the summer, because Blake Hebert's kind of that veteran coming back. So the one thing I'm extremely confident in is we are going to see a lot of Noah Grubbs tomorrow. Excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, look, as you said, we don't know if we're going to get a chance to see Blake Hebert. I hope that we do. It was kind of cool to be. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts on it were, Trev, but it was kind of cool to see him and Brennan Vernon, kind of performing. I told you that they were in a band together, and so we got a chance to see them. But how about Brennan Vernon shredding at the end of that thing, man? That was flipping awesome, by the way, to see that. But this is kind of the way I look at it, Trevor, is the battle for the backup quarterback spot is going to kind of come in phases. And this is the end of the end of phase 1, which is kind of the winter into the spring. And then phase 2 is, summer workouts and then fall camp. And then phase 3 is just throughout the off season, or the regular season, the growth, development, things along those lines. Who is able to win phase 1? Is it Noah Grubbs? Is it Blake Hebert? Is that decision already made and the spring game is just an example of that? Or for me, I care a whole lot more about what Noah Grubbs and Blake Hebert do in a game like this than maybe I have in the past, because it's not so much I'm going to evaluate Blake Hebert for, he had this completion percentage and this many yards, but more so do they show the same kind of moxie that they showed inside the indoor facility? That's kind of something that that is gonna make it very interesting. And by the way, it's boundary is W, Z is the slot, X is the field outside receiver. There's a debate in the chat right now what that means. That's how Notre Dame defines their positions. The boundary is W, Y is the tight end, and then H is the second tight end. Just so we can have that all clear in the chat. So make it more. So when I refer to that, that's what I'm referring to. But I kind of think that this is not that you overreact to it, Trev, but this is a learning experience. You're going to learn something about these quarterbacks with how they perform in a stadium that's got, hopefully 20 to 40,000 people in it. And again, not end all be all, but it's going to tell me. And so what's that lasting impression? What's that final impression that these quarterbacks leave? And I think that's especially true. I think for Blake Hebert, who's had a bit of an up and down spring, hasn't been healthy. If he can go, that's great. Let's see what he can do. But if he can't go, you've given Noah Grubbs a golden opportunity to kind of say, okay, I've now put myself in a great position to be that guy when we get into the summer. And then now I can really grow because now I know the offense, I know the expectations, I know the drills and the way that Coach Gaduli teaches it. Now I'm ready to really take off.
More so than any other position group, maybe outside of kicker, the crowd and the environment is something that you evaluate with the quarterbacks. If it's Will Black's first time at left tackle, is there a factor of, hey, it's your first time in Notre Dame Stadium in a game-like setting? Sure. But for somebody like Noah Grubbs, that hits a little bit different. So I agree with you. I'm with you completely. One question that we do have on the offensive side of the ball, Brian, before we switch it over to defense, is the running backs. Will they leave a lasting impression going into the summer? Because this has been a very light room. We haven't seen Javian Osborne. We haven't seen Kedron Young. We've seen Aeneas Williams in capacity. How do they work him into the spring game? Do they go thud at some point? Put him in a red jersey? Who knows? But what we do know is we're going to see a lot of Nolan James Jr. and we're going to see a lot of Jonas Walton. Very excited to see both of them. Can they leave the fans and us as analysts with a strong vote of confidence that it's like, hey, they're in really good shape until some of these other guys come back?
Heck yeah. And I'm curious if, last year they did some 7-on-7 stuff. Do they do any of that with Aeneas Williams? I am curious about that. But, look, if you don't end the spring on a strong note, you make it a lot easier for Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young, and eventually Javian Osborne to kind of make a move. And Jonas Walton, to me, is just kind of steadily grown. Nolan James has been pretty steady. Very curious to see if either one of them kind of have a big day in the stadium and what's that final impression that they leave as well. I'm excited to see Notre Dame fans get a glimpse of Jonas Walton. I mean, we've seen Nolan you guys, there's not a bigger Nolan James fan out there outside of the James family than me. But I'm also a huge fan of all the other running backs. That's what I love about that room. But, fans have seen Nolan. They saw him in last year's spring game. He did well. They've seen him in games, and he's carried the ball in games. They haven't seen Jonas Walton wearing the gold and blue yet. And I can't wait to see it, because last week was the first chance we got to see him in a real live situation, because they didn't have pads on the first practice, and everything else that we saw in the two other periods was individual drill. If a guy doesn't look athletic going through bags, during practice in Notre Dame, he shouldn't be on scholarship at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? How'd they look in practice? Well, they all knew how to go through drills. Well, did they look good athletically? Yeah, they're scholarship players at the University of Notre Dame. They better look good in Indy. So when we got a chance to see him last week with the pads on and guys can hit him, you're like, okay, early on, okay, what am I doing? But it didn't take him many hits at all to be like, all right, this is just like high school football. You know what I mean? This is just what I do. Make the read, make the hit. And when you see daylight, turn on the afterburners, right? One of my favorite calls of all time, Trev, and I'm sure I'm sure that you're gonna know this one, but I think it was the Michigan game where I think it was Michigan in 1989. I just looked it up. It was Michigan 1989 when Rocket hits it, and Tony Roberts, who just, to me, like Johnny Most is the voice of the Celtics, and Tony Roberts to me will always be the voice of Notre Dame football. For my dad, it was Lindsey Nelson, but for me, it's Tony Roberts. But he's like, after our burners are on, baby, when Rocket's taking one to the house, you know what I mean? Like, we're gonna get some Jonas Walton calls like that. Like when he turns the afterburners on, that fella can scoot, and I'm excited. I hope he's able to kind of get out in space in this game so Notre Dame fans can see. Like, don't let his short, stocky, miniature Audric Estime frame confuse you. My man can fly, and I hope that Notre Dame fans get a chance to see that on Saturday.
I hope so too, man. The kid can absolutely move, and I'm excited to see him. I mean, he was moving pretty quick in the Jersey scrimmage. I'm excited to see him out in the open field in the Blue-Gold game. That's for sure. I'm with you completely. Let's talk defensive side of the ball real quick, man. And where we're going to start here is more big picture. It's not necessarily a position group, but it's more so overarching identity of this defense and play calling. We want to see more aggressiveness from the play caller. Now, and Brian, you can tell me if you differ. This is how I look at this. Similar to what you talked about at the start of all of this, where what we've seen in the spring game is not the end-all, be-all, and that's just what we're going to see for the season. There's a little bit of that. Now, mind you, we're coming from a different angle here because we've seen multiple practices. So what we're going to evaluate tomorrow is going to be very interesting in terms of defensive play calling and their level of aggressiveness, because we walked away from the Jersey scrimmage with the idea of like, hey, today felt intentional one way or another. We think that they were trying to do some things on the offensive side of the ball, which led to how the defensive practice was formatted. I'll be very interested to see how they handle tomorrow or Saturday in the Blue-Gold game. Very interested.
Trev, normally I wouldn't care about what a defensive coordinator does in the Jersey scrimmage or in the Blue-Gold game. And to a certain degree, I don't care. Like, it's not going to define what happens, because last year they were aggressive in the spring and they weren't in the first couple games. But it's more so the fear in the back of my mind about what does Chris Ash really want to do, and knowing why he made adjustments last season. I mean, we can just all be honest. He didn't do that because he just felt it was the right thing to do. He did that because the boss man came in and basically said, I was told by two sources, including one that's no longer with the program, that there were some intense conversations after the Purdue game about things weren't being done the way that Marcus Freeman wanted to be done. So do we see him go back to that now? And in the Jersey scrimmage, we saw him run a defense that looked a lot like the defense we saw against Miami. Having said that, as I said last week, we shouldn't panic just because, that could have just been they're working on something this spring. It is still the spring. It is the time to work on things you're not as good at or things you need to get better at. So it's not that I am going to panic, or even if they come out and heat the offense up every play, it's not going to make me like, all right, sweet. It's because it's going to give me a sense of like, okay, at least we don't have to keep having this conversation for the rest of the offseason. Because we can just say, hey, look, guys, we saw this. It was great. Now we'll just wait and see if we see it in the fall. It's more of just a peace of mind that, hey, they are going to not drop a guy that we think can be an elite pass rusher in the coverage 45 to, 10, let's be more realistic, 10, 12 times a game. They're actually going to let those guys rush the quarterback. I was not in love with how many times we saw Boubacar and Bryce Young drop into coverage. Now, again, in practice, we saw Boubacar picking off a pass, and that's fine. You do it at times, but how often do you want to do it? How often to where we're getting to the point of a negative return, you know what I mean, Trev, where you're not getting as much of a pass rush, and now teams are expecting and they can play it, all those type of things. So, again, I don't want to overreact to what we saw in the Jersey scrimmage, but it's kind of like if we see it in the Jersey scrimmage and we see it in the Blue-Gold game, it's kind of like it's just going to leave a little bit of a taste in my mouth in a way that, honestly, a spring game should not have us reacting. And that's kind of why I'm not taking my own advice here. So I just would like to see him just look a little bit more aggressive. And that doesn't mean blitzing 6 guys every day. It just means play downhill. But it's also like there's no Drake Bowen, there's no Kingston, there's no, you know what I mean? So like that's part of it too. You can't ignore that. But it's just that paranoia that I don't ever want to see the defense look again like it did against Miami, Texas A&M, and Purdue. That's really what it comes down to.
I get you, man. I get you completely. Step in the right direction as long as he doesn't ask a defensive tackle built like Jerron Jones to drop back into coverage. I think it's at least we know I'm fairly confident in saying that we're not going to see that like we did under a previous defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. But besides the point, very excited to see what that philosophy is going to look like. Also, sticking along the conversation with the pass rush and some of the defensive ends, I'm very excited to see this young defensive line class, man. We've raved about Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Utade and what they've done all spring. Some of the newcomers in Keon Keeley. What do we see from Logan Thomas? What do we see from some of the newcomers along the interior? I'm very excited to see this defensive line come together and really start to make plays. It's going to be exciting. For one thing I'm looking forward to is in the post-game show when we kind of scroll through the chat and we're looking at some of the comments. Some of the people saying, that's what you guys were talking about. Oh, that's what you were talking about with Tion Gray. Oh, that's what you were talking about with Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Utade. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, especially on the edge. You know, look, if Boubacar goes out there and has a couple sacks, you're like, all right, well, sweet. We kind of knew that. But, like, I just have a certain expectation for Boubacar. And to Bryce to a degree, I would like to see a little something from Bryce. But, like, I don't worry about Boubacar Traore. I just feel like he's going to be fine. You know, what does Keon look like? What does Ebenezer and Rodney look like? You know, they've had great springs. Can they finish their springs off on a great note? Because as much as you and I are excited about the starting defensive end duo, there are legitimate question marks about what's behind them. A great spring game performance doesn't answer those questions, and a not overly productive one doesn't heighten the question marks. It's just, where are they in their development? That's where I'm at. And like for Rodney and Ebenezer, it's not like the spring game. If they go out there and both have 2 sacks, it's like, all right, cool. Watch your backs, you know, Boubacar and Bryce, your jobs are in jeopardy. But it's more of a, okay, where are they now 15 workouts in? Where is their development, and how does it then springboard them into the offseason that then helps them eventually be ready to go out and help you win a championship? And that's where I'm at. And then as a fellow Notre Dame fan, I'm excited and hopeful that Notre Dame fans that are in attendance and watching on TV are able to see from Rodney and Ebenezer what we've seen so far in practice from Rodney and Ebenezer, which is, man, those cats are athletic and long, and they're going to be good football players. And, you know, this is going to be a cool moment for Keon Keeley, in my opinion, as well, because it's been a long journey for that young man to get back to Notre Dame, where he should have been in the first place. But you know what? As a young man, maybe he needed this journey to get to the point where he's going to be successful in all things. But it's going to be a cool moment watching him finally get to run out of that tunnel, because I know he's dreamed about it for quite a long time, and then obviously things went in a different direction. So that part will be cool. So it would be it'd be pretty awesome, in my opinion, if Keon was able to kind of go out there and maybe make a play or two in the spring game, his first time in Notre Dame Stadium. It won't mean a whole lot in the big picture of things, but it'll be a pretty cool moment.
Last thing that I'm going to be keeping my eye out for, and you have to look at this and take this with a grain of salt, but this is also the first time we're going to see all 3 of these defensive coaching assistants that are new to Notre Dame in somewhat of a game day-like operation. And some of it you just kind of have to evaluate, take it with a grain of salt, because for all intents and purposes, this is like a glorified scrimmage, and I love it. But I'm not going to say what I see from Brian John Marie or Aaron Henry or Charlie Partridge is just going to be indicative of what we see from them on September 6th when they play Wisconsin up at Lambeau Field. But I'll be interested to see how they handle things like, you know, substitutions. How are they in game? I think that's going to be a lot of fun to follow. So that'll be another thing that I'll be paying attention to, somewhat of that sideline operation. And it'll be easier because if they do what they did last year, it'll be separate on the offensive and defensive sidelines. So I'm excited to see what they do there. But all in all, Brian, very much looking forward to Saturday.
You know, it's funny. I am not at all worried about the 3 new assistant coaches. The guy that I'm worried about on defense is the guy that returns. You know what I mean? It's like, I've been so pleased with what I've seen from Charlie Partridge and Brian Jean Marie and Aaron Henry. But to your point, Trev, it's kind of like the players we've seen. Well, now we get to see it on a little bit of a bigger stage. And it just gives us another evaluation point, another data point as we prepare for the season. But, whose guys go out there and make plays and whose don't and all that stuff is going to be a whole lot of fun. But, yeah, so far, so good with those guys, Trev, in my opinion. The other thing that I'm looking forward to seeing is there's a lot of young secondary players, Trevor, that Notre Dame fans are going to get to see for the first time, and I think that they're going to very much enjoy it, especially 13 and 20.
Yeah, they're going to put on a show. I believe that to be true. I'm with you, man. I'm with you.
Joey's the guy that, to me, Trev, that I actually think this spring game might mean a little bit more for him than maybe it does some other players, because I do think he's in a legitimate battle for a number 2 spot. And then if you do win the number 2 spot and you're the 4th safety, that doesn't mean you're going to play. You could be the 4th safety and still not play a whole lot. Last year, a lot of times they went with 3 safeties, and then Luke would play like a nickel and dime, but he wasn't like necessarily part of like the full rotation the way that Jalen Stroman was when he was healthy. So I think for Joey, it's going to be a great chance to kind of see, okay, how's he growing? Is he going to put his nose down in the box and stick people? Is he going to make reads? Is he going to show anticipation? Is he going to show confidence? If he gets beat, does he bounce back and make plays? I'm very much curious to see that. And then, Aiden Pouncey's been, like you'd expect from a freshman, there's mistakes and times he gets beat and times he doesn't do what he's supposed to do. But when he does what he's supposed to do, he's been very, very impressive. So I think he's another one that I'm very much looking forward to seeing this spring.
I'm with you, man. For all intents and purposes, for this class, Aiden Pouncey's QB or cornerback 1 with Kari Adams still waiting to come back from injury. So excited to see what kind of plays he makes, and I'm with you completely on Joey O'Brien. It's going to be a fun afternoon on Saturday. That's for sure. Very excited to see all those kids.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, in the next part of the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, the NFL draft kicks off tonight, and we wanted to kind of wrap everything up. And we've talked a lot over the last couple of weeks about the different mock drafts and where we could see guys like Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price going. So we thought, with the draft happening here in a little bit over 6 hours, it's when it starts to go live for round 1. We wanted to kind of wrap everything up and give our final thoughts on the draft. Take a look at some final mock drafts, final look at where some Notre Dame players are going to go, and then we're going to kind of look at the draft overall as a whole. It was going to be a really, really fun conversation, man, because this is, you said it at the start of the show. You love the NFL draft. You love projecting where players are going to go. Then we can start talking about their fit and, what we like about the pick, what we don't. Or, did you draft specifically at a need, or did you just look at the upside and the potential? So it's going to be a fun conversation, man. I love talking the NFL draft.
It is, and I wouldn't call myself a draft geek the way that I used to be, but I'm still a big fan of the draft. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And when you look at the Notre Dame players, the biggest thing is, Trev, I mean, it really starts with the 2 running backs at the top. And when we'll talk about the mock drafts, but just big picture first and foremost. I had somebody point this out to me the other day, and I was like, is this true? Like, so somebody DM'd me and they're like, hey, I can't remember where he said he heard it from. I just wrote an article about it because I looked it up and it's true. There has never been in a draft 2 running backs from the same school get picked 1 and 2 at running back in a draft. I went back all the way to when they started counting running backs, like in the 30s. There's been a time when you've had 2 running backs go in the first round. That's happened before. But there has never been a time, from what I could tell, and there was a couple that I actually that I looked at to see if like that was the case or not. But yeah, there's never been a time when you had 2 running backs go as the number 1 and 2 backs in a draft. So, because I thought there was 2 times that might have happened. The 2 times were when Felix Jones and Darren McFadden got picked. And then the other one I thought might have happened was when Ronnie Brown and Cadillac Williams both came out. But when Cadillac and Ronnie came out, Cedric Benson was picked in between them. And when the other one, when Darren McFadden came out and Felix Jones, he went 4. Felix Jones went 22, but then Jonathan Stewart was in between them. So I thought that was fascinating. So they got a chance to make history tonight, and would be very, very cool. How does that – like, think about that. Not only are you going to add and build on your 538 all-time picks, which is number 1, by the way. Trev's got an article on Irish Breakdown about it. you got a chance to kind of build on that, but now you got a chance to make history and do something that's never been done before, which is 2 running backs from the same draft class from the same school get picked 1 and 2 at the position. That's pretty cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah, it's not very often with the NFL have been around for such a long time and college football around for such a long time that, you have the opportunity to say, this is the first time that this has happened in history. So it's cool to say that in a year where Notre Dame's rushing attack kind of dominated college football and they had the best running back in college football, brought back the first Doak Walker Award for Notre Dame, first one ever in program history. They also have the opportunity to do one more thing for the first time in history before they officially close the book on being done at Notre Dame and they go to their NFL team. So that's really, really cool, man. I'm with you.
No, we've seen that at Notre Dame before at other positions. In 2018, Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey were the first 2 offensive linemen taken in the draft, but we haven't seen that at running back. So Notre Dame taking another step towards becoming Trev RBU. They're not there yet, but this takes a step there. No question about it.
Massive step in the right direction, man. Absolutely massive step. Let's take a look real quick at some of the final mock drafts that have come out, man. And there's been some interesting ones, specifically around the first round and where many analysts believe that some players will fall. I've seen a bunch of different ones. I've seen some where Jeremiah Love's now projected to go to the Arizona Cardinals with that 3rd overall pick. I've seen some where he's, they're staying consistent with him going to the Tennessee Titans. But the new one in the mix now is now that the New York Giants have 2 top 10 picks in the first round, I've seen some where he's projected to go 5 overall to the New York Giants. Now, we could have a discussion around whether we think he's going to fall to 5th with the Cardinals and the Titans picking ahead of him. But I thought that was an interesting wrinkle in some of these new ones.
Yeah, so what's interesting about this is there's really a couple aspects of this kind of the way that mocks are kind of shaking and some of the quote unquote intel that's coming out. And the intel is it's like, it just depends on who you believe. There's people that think that you could see a scenario in which the Cardinals try to trade down. If they can't trade down, people have said that they think that they're going to take Jeremiah Love. I've seen some other people say, well, no, actually, if they don't move down, it depends on who gets picked number 2. So if David Bailey goes number 2, they may take Arvell Reese or I can't remember if the Jets take Arvell Reese at 2, the Cardinals would then take David Bailey at 3, or they're trying to politic to get whoever goes 2, whichever edge rusher goes 2, they want someone to trade up to number 3 to take the other edge rusher. If that happens and some combination of that happens, then where does Jeremiah go after that? And I think that's why the range is like 3 to 7. I've seen a couple recent mock drafts that have him falling all the way to number 7 to the Commanders, which is possible. But you're seeing more and more and more in that 3 to 5 range of the final mock drafts that are coming out, Trev. You're seeing some sending them to the Titans with the thought being, and I actually think this makes a lot of sense. You just drafted a quarterback number 1 overall. Give him a weapon to build around. It's not a year where there's an offensive lineman that you should take it for. So don't try to, overdraft there. If you can trade down and take an offensive lineman, great, pick up more draft picks. The Titans need more than just one player. But so many times we see teams have a franchise quarterback and they refuse to build around him. You look at the difference in the Bills and the Chiefs, where Josh Allen is the franchise of the Bills, and and Patrick Mahomes is the franchise of the Chiefs, and he's a great player. But the Chiefs have done such a better job of putting weapons around Patrick Mahomes. I'm not trying to say Patrick Mahomes isn't as good as Josh Allen or vice versa. What I'm saying is one organization understands that we're not going to ask our franchise quarterback to carry a team the way that the Broncos asked John Elway to carry that team. We're going to put weapons around him. We're going to Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. And, over the years, they've added players like that. The Bills haven't done that as well. Now, I think they're trying to. They got him a running back last year. Got to get him some weapons to throw the ball to. They've tried to get guys. They just haven't panned out. Keon Coleman and things like that. Could give Cam Ward that kind of elite running back that can also catch the football would make a lot of sense. But, if they decide to go a different direction, there's a reason the Titans picked number 1 last year and they're picking number 4 this year. You know what I mean, Trev? Where does he fall? Do the Giants take him? Do they go defense and offense? I mean, there's just a lot of things. 5 is too high to take. Some people say 5 is still too high to take a running back. I think that whole positional value thing is nonsense. If you get yourself a chance to get an elite player, take an elite player. And the whole positional value thing is why some teams keep picking in the top 10 over and over and over again, because you keep passing on elite players because they don't fit your positional value conversation. You know, you just, don't even get me started on that. But 6 Browns, I don't see that one. So if he doesn't go to the Giants at 5, I think there's a chance the Commanders there 7 scoop him up. But stranger things have happened, Trev. But from everything we've seen so far, 3 to 5 is the constant in the mock drafts. That's the constant projection we've seen from the people who do this for a living. And I think Ryan actually, let me see, he texted me this the other day, but I think that Ryan has Jeremiah going number 4, I think, in his mock draft. Let me see real quick, see if I can find it. But it's going to be interesting to see. He's got him 4th to Tennessee. That's where Ryan has Jeremiah Love going. So that's kind of where they are.
That makes sense. That's where he has the highest odds to go on FanDuel. They have all their draft odds out tonight for the NFL draft, and he has the best odds to go number 4 overall. And then there's obviously odds out for him for 3rd overall and then 5th overall. There's like fun ones, like he's still like mentioned to go 1st overall, but it's like plus 22,000. Like but I could see 4th, but I'm with you, man. I mean, the NFL organization's refusal to build around franchise quarterbacks, and I believe Cam Ward to be a franchise quarterback, is interesting to watch. Certain teams continue to do. But look, the last time Tennessee was relevant is when they had a good run game. Since Derrick Henry's departure, they've really, really struggled to run the foot. And I'm not saying they need a Derrick Henry type of running back. Jeremiah Love and Derrick Henry are not the same style of player, not even close. But I'm talking in terms of impact. And with all due respect to Tyjae Spear and Tony Pollard, they're not Jeremiah Love, nor do they have his upside. He's an electric playmaker. You give him a weapon like that out of the backfield, I think that's going to bode well, extremely well for him. But I'm with you. Positional value doesn't mean much to me either in a draft class that's this shallow. Now, you talk about positional value. It's like, okay, so what left tackle in this year's draft are you taking 2nd overall then?
Right.
So
you're going to overdraft a player who's not talented enough to be at number 5?
Exactly.
But his value of position, like that's why you keep picking here. That's why you're in the top 5 to 10 every freaking year.
It's the positional value conversation why Ty Simpson continues to get all this love about going in the 1st round and potentially being a top 10 pick and the 2nd quarterback being taken off the board, because there's some GMs and there's some organizations out there that refuse to draft based on what's the fit for this team and who's the best available. It's like, but typically in this range, people take a quarterback. Who's the next one up? I guess it's Ty Simpson, so we're going to push for him. It's like, best of luck to you. Yeah. I don't know what to tell you. So that's
exactly.
That's the whole thing, man.
Yeah, I mean, because like Trev, you look at the 2022 draft, and the year that Kyle Hamilton got passed on by teams. There's some guys in that list that were at positions of value that aren't nearly the players that Kyle Hamilton's turned out to be. You know what I mean? So it's like maybe you should have thought twice about maybe not taking that guy and maybe taking the guy that's actually a really good player. And some of them have been good players, but like, are they playing like top 10 players? Are they paying like number 6 overall? And it's like, well, we can justify him not maybe playing quite as good as we wanted him to because, he is this or that or the other thing. And it's just kind of like, okay. I mean, I get it, but
well, that's why I feel the way I do about Jadarian Price, another player that's kind of been floating back and forth between, end of the 1st round, early to middle part of the 2nd round. It's like, look, how many times are you going to continue to pass on a player that has that level of talent, especially when the need is there? You know what I'm saying? Like, I look at the Seattle Seahawks running back room. It's like you have Zach Charbonnet, who's coming off of an ACL injury, and you let Kenneth Walker go. He's now in the Kansas City Chiefs. He's fresh off of a Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah.
Who else are you going to take there? Don't make the mistakes that other organizations have made before of trying to like find the diamond in the rough pick. It's like, hey, we're going to sneak one in here at the end of the first round and he'll pan out. I mean, do I have to continuously bring up the fact that Jalen Reagor was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles before Justin Jefferson was taken off the board? We'll talk about overthinking. You want to talk about trying to go out of their way to find that diamond in the rough. Go out and get the second best running back in this draft class at the end of the first round. I mean, I don't think it's that hard of a recipe, especially when your running back room right now is barren.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at, Kyle Hamilton getting passed up, and you look at part of the reason why is because you had 3 teams decided to take offensive tackles before they took him. So you had Ikem Ekwonu from the NC State who went to the Panthers. He's been solid. He's as many Pro Bowls. Evan Neal from the Giants at number 7. Guess what? They didn't pick up his 5th-year option. He's now a free agent. It's just – and then Charles Cross for the Seahawks has been a solid player from what I can tell. But, has he played like the number 6 overall draft pick? I mean, a top 10 overall draft pick? Has he made a bunch of Pro Bowls like Kyle Hamilton has? So, again, you got a guy at a quote-unquote position of power, and he's been a solid player, and he started on the Super Bowl team. I guess that's that's obviously a good thing, but has he been the player that you're paying a lot of money for a guy to just be an okay player? The Panthers picked up the 5th-year option for the NC State offensive tackle Ekwonu, but you're paying him $17.5 million, 0 Pro Bowls, 0 All-Pro teams. That's a lot of money. Where, you'd be paying a lot of money to Kyle Hamilton to pick up his 5th-year option. But you're getting a guy that's been a multi-time Pro Bowler. And that's the whole thing that has always kind of bothered me about it is that they do this positional value thing. And it's not even about, are you able to impact the game? It's like, well, we can't pay every position X amount of dollars. And so if we're going to pay that money to a safety, then we can't do this. And it's just one of the things I don't like about the NFL, to be completely honest with you. And it's why we see quarterbacks get drafted way higher than they have any business being drafted. Way higher than they should be drafted.
Agreed completely. And we're definitely going to be talking about those 2026 quarterbacks here soon, man, because that draft class, this is a rough draft class. I mean, I've seen people talk about how they don't think the 2027 draft class is all that in a bag of chips. Compared to what? It's not compared to this draft class.
I mean, way better at quarterback. It's going to have the best receiver in college football. I just think some people like to be contrarian. That's what I think. Best. I mean, next year's draft class, if one of the quarterbacks would have come out, maybe they go higher than Mendoza. Maybe not. But certainly they would have had the number 1 receiver taken in the draft. Would likely have the number 1 corner taken in the draft. And I'd really like to see how NFL teams view Colin Simmons and Dylan Stewart compared to the older players. You know what I mean? There's going to be some really interesting takes next year with some of those guys. How does KJ Bolden get viewed next year coming out compared to Caleb Downs? You know what I mean? I think those are some bad takes. But, hey, just like with any profession, Trev, even people that do the draft all the time have some bad takes, just like people like us have bad takes from time to time. But just my overall sense, it's not a great draft class, and that's why you take the best player in this particular draft class. Now, if you're at a position where you have a very similar grade, Francis Mauigoa is your number 3 player on the board, and Jeremiah Love is your number 2, and you think they're similar in your grade, then you don't really need a running back. And sure, okay, take them. But if Jeremiah Love's the number 2 player on your board and you're picking 5 and you pick the number 10 player on your board because of the positional value, you just screwed up, in my opinion. So, but that's why certain teams keep picking over and over and over again. New York Jets in 2022 had 2 top 10 draft picks. One of them they've traded away because they sucked and, knew they were going to win in his window. So good job with that.
Yeah. Hopefully you still like to see a switch up with some of the draft beliefs of the GMs that continuously have top 10 picks. I'm with you, but I'm not holding my breath for that, especially when we talk about the Jets, the Raiders, the Browns. I think they're just habitually going to be in the top 10, unfortunately for them. Mm-hmm. Where I think this draft could get made and where, after the end of this upcoming NFL season, where we sit down and look at who had the most impact, I think rounds 2 to 3 are going to be super interesting. Who starts to give, especially if guys like Jadarian fall to the second round or some other players that have higher draft grades start to fall to the second round. This could be one where rounds 2 to 3 really make up somebody's draft class. And One of those guys like Malachi Fields, very interested to see where he goes.
Yeah.
I'm confident he goes in day 2. He's going to get drafted
Sure.
on Friday. The question is just where and when.
Yeah, I agree.
Like that's the whole thing. Very interested to see where somebody like him goes.
I'd be surprised if he falls out of day 2, especially if what we have seen in a lot of these mock drafts comes true, which is, I mean, I've seen 5 to 6 wide receivers at least taken in the first round in a lot of these mock drafts. And if that happens, then if you're someone who's in need of a receiver, you better be looking for one in rounds 2 and 3. And where does he fall kind of in that category? So I mean, you're seeing it quite a bit. Looking at Daniel Jeremiah's draft, he's got Jordan Tyson going number 7 overall to the Commanders. He's got Cardinal Tate going number 10 overall to the Giants. He's got Mekhi Lemon going 13 overall to the Rams. He's got Omar Cooper going 16 overall to the Jets. He's got, let's see here, Casey Concepcion going to the Browns. He's got Denzel Boston going to the 49ers. So, when you look at his draft prospects, I believe he had Malachi Fields. I'm actually going to look this up. So he had his number 1 receiver was Cardinal Tate. So then he had Mekhi 2, Omar Cooper, Jordan Tyson, Denzel Boston, Casey Concepcion. Let's see here. He had Jeremy Bernard, Antonio Williams, and Malachi Fields was his number 9 receiver. So if you have 6 of your top receivers going in round 1, and this guy's 9th on your receiver board, let's just say hypothetically that NFL teams see it the same way Daniel Jeremiah does, can you really wait till the 3rd round to make that next receiver run? That's a legitimate question. So that could vault guys up. Like we saw this happen with Ian Book. There was that 2nd, 3rd round run on quarterbacks that were like taken a little high. You think of Kellen Mond and Davis Mills from Stanford, and then that just kind of vaulted Ian Book up into round 4 because it's like he's the next best quarterback, and after him there was a perception of another drop off. So then the Saints kind of panicked a little bit, took Ian in the 4th round. So we could see that a little bit too, Trev, because sometimes runs happen. Like, oh shoot, we weren't thinking about taking a receiver there, but if we don't, then as those things happen, then that kind of pushes other guys up the board. And then how do teams view running back? Like, do you say, okay, well, is Jadarian that much better than your 3rd and 4th guy to where you just say, we're just going to wait till round 3 or 4 to take a running back? But if you view him as the clear number 2 running back, and that's a big need for you, do you take him at the end of round 1? Do you trade up to get him at the end of round 1 or early round 2? Those things are going to be very interesting and certainly will impact Notre Dame players. So I expect there to be 3 Notre Dame players taken in the first 2 rounds. I'd be a little surprised if somebody else goes there just because we haven't seen those mock drafts. But I didn't expect Robert Hainsey to be a 3rd round pick either. And the Buccaneers fell in love with him. It just takes that one team to fall in love with a kid for him to be taken high. And then that can combine sometimes with, okay, this draft class at that position kind of it thinned out a lot quicker than we were anticipating it thinning out. And that could have an impact on it as well. So, but then again, if the receivers don't go like people think, and let's say they all fall, the first guy taken's not till 10, now all of a sudden there's value in the top of the 2nd round. Those teams that may be looking for guys end of 2nd, early 3, maybe now they're looking for guys at 2 because certain guys fell. So that's part of the fun of the draft, Trev, is like how those runs can impact who gets picked. I mean, we've seen, remember the year the Texans panicked for an offensive tackle? They took that kid from Alabama A&M. I think it was like Tyrus Powell or something. No, it wasn't Tyrus Powell. It was, what was that kid's name? But they panicked because there was a run on offensive tackles. And so they took a kid like way higher than anybody thought he was going to go. And it ended up being, it was, let's see here. When was that? Oh man, it was under Bill O'Brien. I thought maybe it wasn't Alabama A&M. Let me find who that tackle was, but they took a kid like in the 1st round and it was like, what the heck are you guys doing? Let me see if I can find Titus Howard from Alabama State, not Alabama A&M. And they took him number 3 and people were like, wait a minute, what? Why did you take him? And a big part of it at the time was because there was a run on offensive tackles in that draft class, and Andre Dillard went high and a couple others went high, and they kind of panicked and took a guy. So it was you always kind of see some of that stuff a little bit. So how does that impact Jadarian Price? How does that impact Malachi Fields? I'm very much looking forward to that tonight.
My biggest thing for Malachi Fields is I care more about the fit in where he goes than if it's round 2 or 3. I mean, ideally, it'd be cool to say that Notre Dame had a second-round draft pick at wide receiver. Haven't had that since Chase Claypool in the 2020 draft. But I care more about his fit. I want him to go to a team that has experience using a big-bodied 6'4", 6'5" frame in the boundary. I want him to go to a team like that. I've seen him mock to the Ravens. I don't love that fit. Lamar Jackson historically has not been good at targeting those big-bodied boundary possession catch receivers.
Which is wild. You'd think he would be. You know what I mean? Like, you'd think that's the kind of guy he would like.
And in which he has that guy, but it's his tight end. It's Mark Andrews. Like, Lamar Jackson is a significantly more effective passer when Mark Andrews is on the field versus when he's not. So I don't want him to go to a team like that. That wide receiver core is like Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, and they tried to go get him a boundary possession catch guy. They went out and got, I mean, he's older now, but DeAndre Hopkins, he just didn't get targeted in the slightest. I've seen him mock there. I'd rather him go to a place like a Tampa Bay, somewhere that has experience into like a big-bodied Mike Evans type of receiver. I'd like to see him go to the Colts, now that I think Michael Pittman's gone. And so, does he go and replace him and is a good counterpart to Alec Pierce? So those are some of the things that I pay attention to with guys like Malachi Fields, because I prefer fit. Yeah, as long as it's somewhere in the second to third round. The Buccaneers fall like middle to the top of both the second and the third round. They have the 14th pick in the second round and the 14th pick in the third round. I could see him going somewhere there. So ideally somewhere like that for a guy like Fields. Be very interested to see where he goes and where he ends up.
I'd have to know more of the backstory, but Michael Pittman was traded to the Steelers last year along with a 7th-round pick for a 6th-round pick. Like, he hasn't been like an elite player, but he's been a good receiver in the NFL. Like, I just don't understand what the Colts are doing.
The Colts are all in on making Alec Pierce the guy, which
is, I mean, I get that, but you can't get anything better than a 6th-round pick for Michael Pittman. That was... And I assume Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman played the same position.
They used Alec Pierce more to the field. Like, he's kind of there, like, just you run him on goes and you run him on both of them.
Is that it? They couldn't afford both of them or something?
Yeah. Especially because they just signed Daniel Jones to a 2-year, $100 million contract coming off of an Achilles injury. Yeah. It's interesting times down here in the Circle City.
Yeah,
I'll say that.
Sounds like it.
I'll say that. I'm not a Colts fan, so I don't really have a dog in the fight, but it's just I like when the sports teams down here are good because it's good for the city. And it was a choice. I'll say that, but very interested to see where Malachi Fields goes. Overall, I mean, dude, I think probably like what we talked about earlier in the week, good 5 to 8 players from Notre Dame will get taken in this draft. I think that's probably a good range.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes, Trev. Is it like we've seen 6 guys consistently get mock draft, and then one of the 6 is just he's not in all the mock drafts. And every single mock drafts we've seen, there's been Love, Price, Fields, Eli Raritan, and Billy Schrauth. Have you seen a mock draft yet? Even some of the crazy ones that don't have those 5 in it, I have not.
No.
Now, I have seen some that don't have Emil Wagner in it, and then a lot of the ones that do, it's mostly in the 7th round. Well, that's a crapshoot. Somebody may fall in love with him and take him in round 5, and he may fall out. You don't really know. But I'm very curious, and we talked about this in the preview the other day, so we don't need to rehash it. But how are some of those other defenders valued? I'm curious to see that.
I am too, and I think they could find some good homes. Especially Will Compton came and talked to the team about it, how he made his living at the next level in special teams. Tell me a guy like Jalen Stroman can't go and make an NFL living on the special teams. Will Pauling can't make a living on special teams. Yeah, so I think all that'll be very interesting, man. I'm with you. But like you said, talked about it earlier in the week, very interested to see where some of those defenders go. Junior Tuihalamaka, just for his high motor alone, has to find a home somewhere, I would imagine.
Like, does he get drafted or does he get signed as an undrafted free agent? Like here's the guys that I really got my eye on. And I root for Junior because, like, that's just a kid that did it the right way. He could have left. He could have done all those things. I have a great deal of respect for Junior. But, like, Will Pauling's one that I'm very curious to see if he slips into day 3. Devontae Smith is another one. And not just because they were good football players. I mean, we've debated how good was Will Pauling. But, again, as I said the other day, he's a guy with over 100 career catches, over 1,700 career yards at the Power 4 level. It's not like he did it, at Bowling Green and you're like, yeah, I mean, it doesn't translate. He did it, it was in the Big Ten and at Notre Dame. And then he goes out and he's a combine or he's a workout freak. He runs a 4.3, has a 42-inch vertical jump. He's got good shuttle time. And then you see Devontae Smith, not a great 40 time, but 4.55 isn't slow. Great shuttle time. 43-inch Will Pauling had the 43 and Devontae had the 42-inch vertical jump. And then there's a lot of good film. Like, I'm shocked that those two are not getting any of the round 6 or 7 buzz from mock drafters. Do NFL teams see it the same way as they do or not? We don't know the answer to. Are NFL teams starting to kind of say, hey, if it's close, we're taking the Notre Dame kid because of what we've seen Notre Dame kids do. And we've seen a lot of these Notre Dame kids that were undrafted free agents or late round draft picks go on to be pretty darn good NFL players. Obviously, Julian Love went from the 4th round to the Pro Bowl. Alohi Gilman's was a 6th round pick. He's had a very good NFL career. He just got a big payday this offseason from, was it the Chiefs? Did the Chiefs? Yes. I thought it was the Chiefs signed him. He was with the Ravens. He got traded to the Ravens, and then the Chiefs signed him to a pretty nice deal. You see Thomas Harper was an undrafted free agent that's done some things. So we've seen a lot. Cam Hart was a 5th round draft pick, and when healthy, has been a really good corner. Brock Wright on offense, but especially on defense, we've seen a lot of these guys just get overlooked and go to the NFL and be pretty good football players. And when I mean good football players, I mean like Thomas Harper shouldn't have been a 2nd round draft pick, but I think Thomas Harper showed that dude should have been drafted. And so like when do they start kind of getting the benefit of the doubt? For, hey, when, you better go snatch up that Notre Dame kid if you want him, because he's going to be a hot commodity when they come out. And that's kind of the thing that I'm looking forward to seeing, from him. But like I said, Thomas Harper's made 63 tackles in the National Football League, played for the Raiders for a year. He had 26 tackles this past year in 12 games with the Lions. He had 37 tackles. Forced fumble, 5 pass breakups, an interception. Like, that's pretty darn good. In 2 years, you've had 63 combined tackles, 2 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, and a forced fumble and a fumble recovery in 2 seasons as an undrafted free agent. That's not bad. That's not bad. So that's what I'm curious to see. Somebody just pointed out Ben Skoranek. He was a 7th round draft pick, I believe. He's had a nice career in the NFL for a guy drafted there. So those are all things that I'm curious to see, Trev. Like, does somebody fall in love with, hey, man, I'm taking a flyer on Gabriel Rubio. I know he's got some red flags, but this kid's probably a 4th or 5th round draft pick, if not for all the injuries. Do you take a flyer on him in round 7? Do you do that with Jared Dawson? Like, this is going to be fascinating to see if any of those kids can kind of sneak into the back of day 3. And does it grow beyond that 5 or 6 that most people are projecting? Very, very curious to see that.
Let's broaden the scope. Talk just kind of big picture NFL draft, man. It's a very interesting draft. We've talked about like the quarterbacks. I do have a question for you. This isn't quarterback specific, but I feel like more times than not, there's always somebody that through mock draft season is always like, they're going in the top 10, they're going in the top 10. And then somebody every year just drops lower than what, many mock draft analysts thought that they would. Do you have anybody in mind that it could be that for them this year? It's like, hey, they're just a solidified top 10 pick, and then they end up going like 13th. Do you have anybody in mind?
I have, I don't know that I have anybody in particular in mind, but I have some positions in mind. I am very curious to see what happens with the wide receivers in this draft. There's a lot of talk that you're going to start seeing the run on receiver start at 5. Could happen. I don't know that I would. I think the only receiver that I view as a top 7 to 8, 9, 10 talent is the guy with the most medical red flags. That's Jordan Tyson. I like Cardinal Tate a lot. You're drafting Cardinal Tate around where where, elite players are getting drafted, Jamar Chase, guys like that. And I don't know that he's that. He's never been a number one. And for only one of his years, he was not even a number two. Now, part of that's because the guys on his team were number ones. But, is he really a better player than Emeka Egbuka? He's getting drafted like he's a better player than Emeka Egbuka. Same thing with Mekhi Lemon. Mekhi Lemon's a really good football player. Is he a top 10 to 13 draft pick? I'm very curious to see how that goes. And when you look at, Cardinal Tate and Jordan Tyson, those guys are interesting players to see how they kind of go. Caleb Downs is a guy that I've seen go as high as 5. I've seen him go 10. That would make sense to me, the type of player he is. But if Kyle Hamilton can fall to 14, then Caleb Downs could fall. Does the weak draft class keep him from falling as low as Kyle did? It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Because if I remember correctly, Trev, wasn't Kyle Hamilton getting top 5 to 8 mock draft push when he was coming out? He falls all the way to 14 because of the positional value that he had. So that's an interesting one. And does anybody kind of have that medical red flag? Does Reuben Bain kind of get a little bit of that? Does that happen with Caleb Downs? Does that happen with Francis Maunoa? Those are some interesting ones as well. And I think that's where I could see some guys, in the top 10. I think there's some other positions that we could see outside the top 10 where maybe some guys fall, because there's going to be somebody that people view as a consistent top 10 pick that's going to fall. Here's an interesting one. The Jermon McCoy from Tennessee. He's a legit top 10, 15 caliber player, but he's got some legitimate concerns with his knee. Didn't keep him from running a 4.3 something at the pro day, you know what I mean? Or the combine, but that's an interesting one as well, Trev, is who is the medical red flag that falls in this draft? Is it Francis Maunoa? Is it Reuben Bain? Is it Jermod McCoy? That's an interesting one as well.
This isn't a medical concern, but one player in particular that I have my eye on is what happens with Sonny Styles. I'm very interested because, in all mock drafts, I talk about how he's going to, he's a bona fide top 10 pick and he's going to be this and he's going to be that. My wonder, and this has nothing to do with him as a prospect. I mean, physically, he's a freak. He ran what, a 4.46 40. He had a 43.5-inch vertical, 11.2 broad. He's 6'5". He's 244 pounds. Dude's a freak. But my concern for him, if I was, paying attention to where he went in the draft, is does he start to get a little bit of that Isaiah Simmons treatment of there are organizations that have PTSD and look back at what happened with Isaiah Simmons and they're worried about a guy like Sonny. He's going in the first round. This isn't he could drop that far, but what do you do with him? They had very similar things coming into the draft. Isaiah Simmons, 6'4", 240, ran a 4.39 40, a 1.51 split, 11-foot broad, very similar numbers to what he did. And they took him at 8th overall. He got drafted in 2020, 8th overall by the Cardinals. Since then, he's been with the Cardinals. He's been with the Giants. He had a brief stint with the Green Bay Packers. He got picked up on the Panthers practice squad, and they've since re-signed him. So do people get a little bit hesitant with a guy like Sonny Styles? Go okay, he came to Ohio State as a safety. And then he outgrew that position. Then he moved to linebackers. And now it's at the next level, do we put him as a 3-4 type of edge rusher at 6'5", 244? Do we leave him as an outside linebacker? How do we use this kid? Does that go into effect at all? So I'll be very interested to see what happens with him too. Very interested.
I know this isn't going to be popular. I get that. But the Ohio State defenders overall, the 2 linebackers, they're freaks athletically. There's no question about that. But I feel like I'm the only one who is they're getting drafted in the top 5 because of their athleticism, not their production in college. They were good players in college, but I don't know that either one of them were oh my gosh, that guy was unbelievable. Arvell had moments like that. But again, I look at him man, he's the best pass rush in the draft. I'm well, then why do you only have 6.5 sacks? Well, I know he's an off-ball linebacker, but You know, like it just, I don't know. Sonny Styles had 10 tackles for loss the year before, but that was in 16 games. I kind of look at it and I just kind of feel like, shouldn't their production have been a little bit more dynamic? You know, and like, what was the reason? Is it the system? Is it the fact that they were coming off the field late in games of blowouts? I mean, there's a lot of reasons why it could be. And then with Arvell Reese, he was a 1-year guy. I mean, he was a rotation guy. And look, we were super high on Arvell Reese coming into the season. Like, and he was a very good player, but it's like he's a 1-year starter. You're taking a little bit of a risk on him. And that's the debate I've seen with who do you take it to, David Bailey or Arvell Reese? Arvell Reese, you're taking as a, you know, he's got the higher ceiling. David Bailey's the quote unquote safe pick, is what they say. Those things are very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah.
Very interested to see those. Very interested. Kind of makes me think, Brian, do you have any guys that you put, and not necessarily the Ohio State guys, but do you have any guys that you're putting into that boom or bust category in this draft? I feel like there's always a couple of guys that fit that mold every year.
Well, I do think the 2 Ohio State kids are that way. Are they gonna live up to their? Because here's the thing: they're top 5 talents athletically. That's no debate. Just, I mean, neither of them were nearly as good as what Jacob Rodriguez was as a college football player. But you understand why they're going to get drafted in front of Jacob Rodriguez. You know what I mean? So it's like that's kind of where I'm like, oh man, like you better hope it clicks because you're picking them real high. You know, David Bailey's an elite talent, but this is the first year he's really been healthy for an entire season in his career, which is a big question mark. But when I look at some of these boomer bust guys, Trev, and I know there's a couple that I know you have that I won't steal from you, but one guy that I kind of brought up to you when we were talking is Monroe Freeling is a little bit of that for me. Monroe Freeling I find to be a very intriguing player. If you look at him, he's got elite size, 6'7", 315 plus, great athletic numbers. His combine numbers were off the charts. Like he tests like a top 5 to 10 draft pick. Well, then why are some people projecting him in the 20s? Because his film's not very good. He was better this year than he was the year before. Like Notre Dame fans think he's garbage because they remember he was garbage in the Sugar Bowl, but like, guys have bad games and he's not normally that bad. Like that was an especially bad game for him. But he still doesn't have tape like a top 10 pick or a top 15 pick or honestly a first round pick, period. But he's got top 5 to 10 pick athleticism and measurables and size. You're taking a risk on him and you better be patient with him. You don't put him on the blind side of your franchise quarterback just because you know, the day one of he needs to earn it. And if the light goes on and he figures it out and toughens up a little bit and learns, you know, better technique, he's a franchise left tackle. He's got that kind of ability. He could also be the next Alex Leatherwood. And that's kind of where I say there's a big boomer bust production there with him. Big boomer bust.
No, I'm with you. I would have a lot of concerns with him as well. I'm with you. One of the guys on that list for me is Reuben Bain. And no, it's not because he has short arms. Like I know a lot of people pay attention to that, and he has short arms. Can he go be productive like some of the other edge rushers that have? Mine is his play style. I think some of the things that he excelled at in college, he's not going to be able to get away with at the next level. Like Reuben Bain was a bull rusher. Like he was very strong. I mean, I watched him do it for 4 quarters against Notre Dame's offensive tackles. You know, so I'm familiar with what he's able to do, but at the next level, it's different. At 6'2" and some change and 260 pounds, are you going to be able to bull rush NFL offensive tackles the same way that you did Emil Wagner? At 6'6", 304 pounds, you're going to be able to do that to Penei Sewell? You'll be able to do that to Tristan Wirfs? Are you going to be able to do that to Joe Alt the same way, to the same level of effectiveness that you did in college? I don't know the answer to that. That's why I put him in that category. Boomer bust might be a little bit too, like, I think he'll be a good player at the next level.
No, I think it's very fair, Trev, because can I add to your potential boomer bust stuff? You look at Reuben Bain and you look at how good he was against Notre Dame, and you look at how good he was against Texas A&M and how good he was against Indiana, and you got to ask yourself, why did he only have 7.5 tackles for loss in the regular season? Right. I want to know the answer to that question. Yes, he was elite in the postseason. He had 6, 4, 5, 6. He had 8 tackles for loss and 5 sacks in the postseason. That's a heck of a performance. Like, oh, he's a big game guy. Okay, fine. But why did he only have 8.5 tackles for loss and 4 sacks in the regular season? 5 sacks in the regular season. Why did he go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 game stretch where he had 1.5 sacks? Right in the middle of the hardest season, including 2 games they lost. That's a big red flag for me because that's always been the kind of the issue with Ruben Bain is he runs hot and cold. And there's when he's on, you can't block him. When he's not on, he's a very mediocre player. And I remember you and I talking during the season, like, why didn't Notre Dame face the Miami defense that Louisville and SMU had to face? Like that's a different ball game. If Ruben Bain plays against Notre Dame like he played against those 2 teams. And then, of course, he gets to the postseason and he destroys people. And to your point, you can't get away with that in the NFL when you got 30-inch arms. You can show me all the pictures of his shin bend and all this other kind of stuff you want, but sometimes it's just like, dude, how many great NFL players, which is what you expect the top 10 draft pick to be, were guys who were super hot and cold in college? That's an honest question that I have. And so I'm with you, Trev. That's why I have it. If the light turns on for him and he's consistent, then he could be a really good player. A guy that he reminds me of is who's the Frank Clark, that kind of guy that the Chiefs had recently, like a better version of that. He could certainly be that kind of player. And Elvis Dumervil, although Elvis was even though Elvis was 5'11", Elvis had a lot longer arms. Certainly could be that kind of player. He's got the tools to be it, but I just get real nervous about, like you said, short guys that are power players. You can be an elite power player as a pass rusher, but normally those guys are 6'4" with very long arms. They're not 6'1.5" with 30-inch arms. You know what I mean? Because like your whole game is getting into somebody. Well, you can't do that when you've got 30-inch arms, in the National Football League. So I'm with you. I back your boomer bust for him. We're not saying he's going to be a bust. We're saying he's a risky pick for me. Yep. And there's some questions about that. I know there's another kid that's like that plays a different position. Is Dylan Thieneman actually a great football player, or is he just a great athlete? Because his film, he is, Trev, I said this, we were talking on the phone. He is the exact opposite. He's like, what's the name of that Marvel character where he's like the Void, and then also is it Sentry? Where it's like he's kind of like there's the two polar opposites, like whether you want to go like the old Superman, there's like the good Superman and the bad Superman. Just polar opposites. Dylan Thieneman and Xavier Watts are the exact opposite player. Dylan Thieneman is an elite athlete that produced mainly because he's an elite athlete. And he's got all the physical traits you want. He's tall, he's long, he measured in over 6 feet tall, 31.5-inch arms, ran a 4.35, 41-inch vert, 10.5 broad, just elite athlete with good film. That's it. Good film. And I'm not talking about like what Notre Dame did to him last year, because what they were doing, like having him come from like 30 yards. I mean, like, I'm not even talking about that, Trev. I'm just saying, like, overall, he's got good film. He doesn't have top 20 NFL draft pick film. He's got film that basically has people saying, okay, that's an elite athlete combined with lots of experience and numbers and all that. I don't see an elite football player. Whereas Xavier Watts was the guy that nobody wanted in the first 2 rounds because of the combine numbers that had top 10 NFL draft pick tape. And it was funny kind of watching the Terry Fontenot was the GM who took him, right? Isn't he the guy that drafted him for the Falcons, I believe? Listening to him talk about, like, I don't know how Xavier Watts fell to the 3rd round. I'm like, bro, you passed on him twice. You know what I mean? Like, You took James Pierce with his background and his track record as a human being. You took him in the first round, not Xavier Watts. You got lucky that Xavier fell all the way to you at 96, which means Xavier was closer to round 4 than he was to round 2 by a lot. And he's a, all rookie team. Shocker, because everybody that watched the film knew like this guy's going to play like a 4-4 because he's going to know what you're doing before you know what you're doing half the time. And to me, can Dylan Thieneman figure out the football part of this? Because the athletic part is unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. But I don't love the football player.
No, I'm with you. And I mean, again, not to harp too much on what, the Notre Dame 2024 Purdue game was, because that was just bad for everybody on all accounts. I mean, Will Helt's one of the best defensive ends coming back in college football next year. And I mean, even he had a bad game against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
You can't put too much weight into that.
Notre Dame was
one-on-one in
that day too. That also, it was a bad defensive system, and they got a real pissed off Notre Dame that day. It was bad combination of things for them that day. It really was.
They did, man. But I did see Dylan Thieneman one-on-one quite a bit in the open field with two guys who were also going to be drafted in this round. What does that start to look like? He was better at Oregon. Now it's one of those where it's like, okay, did he reap the benefits of being in a better overall secondary, which then elevated his level of play, or was he an elevator? So it's very interesting to see, but he has first round like measurables and like testing numbers
and production. I mean, he was a 3-year starter in the Big Ten. It's not like he just like didn't do anything in college. It's just, I don't know. I know I might just be a hater, but I don't know. I just expect the guy. I mean, you think about his measurables. He had 7 pass breakups last year. Passes defense 7 the year before that. That's like half a season for Xavier Watts. Like you'd think a guy running a 4.35 would be super productive, from a play on the ball thing. I don't know.
You'd think.
Yeah,
you would think, man. I'm with you. Any final thoughts,
Trev? What's your thoughts on the receiver class? I kind of talked about it earlier. I don't love this class the way that I've seen a lot of people say, like, this is a great receiver class. It's a good receiver class. Cardinal Tate's a good football player. Mekhi Lemon's a good football player. Jordan Tyson's a good football player when healthy. Denzel Boston's a good football player. Casey Concepcion's a good football player. I don't view any of them as quite as good as what they're all projected to be.
Yeah, I think it's fine, man. I think it's a wide receiver draft class full of number 2s. And when I mean number 2s, I don't mean the school that they're coming from. I mean where they project to the league. There's nobody in this draft class that I view as like he's going somewhere to be the guy. Like not like next year when Jeremiah Smith comes out. It's like wherever he goes.
Maybe Ken Coleman, if he can take a jump as a player this year, maybe.
Exactly. That's how I view this draft class. That's why it's so hard for me to justify drafting basically a number 2 receiver to be like to go in the top 10. Yeah, that's what's difficult for me. Like, I don't see Jordan Tyson walking into any franchise and being like their guy. I could be wrong. Like,
if healthy, he's the one guy that I think could be that. If healthy.
Yeah.
Like he could go to the Rams and be a really good flipping football player. Like, allegedly, the Rams are in love with Mekhi Lemon. And I'm like, look, if you get a chance between Mekhi Lemon and Jordan Tyson, as long as you can trust Jordan Tyson's medicals, like, you got to take him. He's just a better player, in my opinion. But no, I agree with you. There's a lot of really good players. Like Omar Cooper wasn't like, you're going to take 2 guys in potentially in the top 20 who were never the number 1 receiver for their own college teams. Well, you understand. All right, Mekhi, you get Carnell because it's Jeremiah Smith, but Omar Cooper was not. I had this debate with one of my favorite members of the board, but Omar Cooper finished as Indiana's leading receiver this year only because he dominated a couple really bad teams and Garrett Surratt got hurt. You take that out and he was not their leading receiver. So if you look at the numbers, he had 4 more catches than Elijah Surratt and had 107 more yards than Elijah Surratt and 2 less touchdowns. And he played 2 more games than Elijah Surratt did. And if you look at his production, 10 of his catches and 207 of his yards and 4 of his touchdowns came against Indiana State. Now, he was good. He's a good player. I like Omar Cooper Jr. Again, he is one of the guys you and I talked about in the preseason is this guy's going to have a breakout year. This is why we don't think Indiana is going to really take a back seat offensively. Their defense was better than I thought it was going to be. We thought their offense was going to be really good this year. But Elijah Surratt was their best receiver the last 2 years. And he's not going to sniff the first round because of, measurables and combine and all that kind of stuff. So that's my thing, Trev, to your point is there's a lot of guys, not only are they not going to be number ones in NFL, they weren't number ones in college. So it's kind of why I'm like, now here's an interesting thing about wide receiver. Next year's draft class and the next couple draft classes could very much test not test it like you said something wrong, but is going to tell us a lot about the point you've brought up about big receivers. Is it just really a lack of good ones, or is it the NFL is transitioning away? Because next year you're going to have Jeremiah Smith coming out. You're going to probably have Cam Coleman coming out. Maybe Charlie Becker comes out. Deuce Robinson comes out. There's going to be a lot. KJ Duff, who's 6'6", comes out. There's going to be a lot of really tall receivers coming out in next year's draft class, Trevor. No question about that. But look again, please don't take this wrong. I really like Omar Cooper Jr. as a player. I don't even have a huge issue with him being a late day 1, early day 2 draft pick, but I just look at him and I'm like, is that really a top 20 draft pick? And I feel that about a lot of the receivers. And part of that's just the nature of this draft class. And it's unfortunate because you're going to draft a guy 12 that in the normal draft class is probably 23, 24, but you got to pay him like he's 12, and that's why I think it's stupid not to take a Jeremiah Love. It's stupid not to take a Sonny Styles. It's stupid not to take an Arvell Reese. Because even though we were like, I don't know, I'm banking on the elite talent. If I have in a draft class like this, if I'm going to miss, I'm going to miss on Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, Jeremiah Love's talent.
Yes.
As opposed to, a Ruben Bain or a guy that maybe has some more questions like that, a receiver, whatever.
Oh, 100%. That's why I brought up Sonny Styles earlier. He should go in the top 10 just for his measurables and his production in college. And absolutely. My fear with him was not for him as a prospect. It's do people take a Carnell Tate over him? Mm-hmm. Do people take a Mekhi Lemon over him? Like that would be my fear because I think that'd be a mistake. I hope he doesn't get the PTSD aftershock of a guy like Isaiah Simmons because I don't believe Sonny Styles to be that. I hope that they lean on the talent because of this draft class. There's not a receiver in my mind that is a top 10 receiver in this draft. Receivers will go top 10 in this draft because that's just kind of the nature of the beast, but I don't think that there's any wide receiver in this draft class that I look at that's that's a top 10 guy.
Yeah.
Overall talent wise, the closest one, if we're just talking strictly talent, is probably Carnell Tate is in that discussion. Jordan Tyson.
Yeah, I think Jordan Tyson is talent wise. I think Jordan Tyson is, but I don't know that I would trust him in the top 10 because he hasn't been able to stay healthy.
That's the rub.
That's my big thing for him. That's why I wouldn't take him in the top 10. Carnell maybe, but look. When Carnell ran a 4.5 at the combine, I was not surprised because he plays like that.
Yeah.
He plays like a guy that's not a burner. And how will he be when he has to be like the guy? We don't know when he is the focal point of another team's game plan. How's he going to be in that situation? We don't know the answer to that because he's never had to be in that situation. So I'm just curious how that's going to go. Very curious. Jimmy in the chat said I like Denzel Boston. That's actually one that I kind of like as well. I'm very curious to see how he does. I think the issue with Denzel Boston, is just I think Washington flew under the radar a little bit, and his production has been good, but it hasn't been elite. But yeah, that's a guy that I'm a little surprised hasn't gotten a little bit more top 20 buzz. Because he's a big kid, 6'4", 212. I'm gonna see what his pro day was, because that could maybe Yeah, he didn't run a 40. Maybe that's it, because they don't see the speed, which I get. And that goes back to your theory, Trev, of, well, why is a 6'4", 212-pound guy that's not a burner not being loved, Brian? Because of what I just told you the other day. They don't value that type of player as much anymore. They'll just take Kenyon Sadiq instead, which I get. I understand. He's an interesting player that's really risen up the draft, Trev, in this offseason. Like, there's teams talking about him going in the top 15, which would be really interesting because he's a very unique kind of player in this draft class. I'm curious to see, that's another one. When does the tight end run start to happen? Positional runs happen all the time. When does the tight end run happen? Where we see the Eli Stowers and those guys start to go.
Yeah, my guess is probably going to be end of the first round, bleeding into the second round. I could see that. The second Kenyon Sadiq gets taken off the board, you're going to probably see like 2 or 3 more tight ends go within the next 20 picks. Guaranteed. Like I just because there is a drop off after the first couple guys, and then you're talking about like projection. Like somebody like Eli Raridan, obviously a little bit biased towards because he went to Notre Dame. Very confident he gets drafted, but he's not in the same league as a Kenyon Sadiq or an Eli Stowers as a draft prospect in my. I have a lot of questions about Eli. Measurables are good. Questions about injury history, inconsistent film. Like those are some of the things. But if you get the best of Eli Raridan, you're getting one heck of a tight end at the next level. But that's something I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah. And I like Kenyon Sadiq as a prospect. I just don't know that I view him as a top 15 draft pick like some people are projecting him to be. You'd think a guy with that kind of athleticism would have just been a little bit more productive.
Oh yeah, I mean that, and I know we just kind of slandered a bunch of like positional value, and that, but like there are positions where I do think that that's a factor. Like tight end is one, and this is coming from somebody who loves tight ends. Tight end is a top 15 draft pick.
He's got. I'm totally fine taking the tight end in the top 15, but he's got to be a dude. He's got to be an absolute dude. Brock Bowers, you take it number 8, take him number 8. You know what I mean? Like that, he's got to be a dude. And I don't view any of these tight ends as that, to your point, Trev. I just don't see them as that. I mean, Eli Raridan has more 100-yard games in his career than Kenyon Sadiq has. Oh,
yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah. And Brock Bowers went in the top 15 at 13th. And that's a dude.
Exactly. Kenyon Sadiq's 2 guys lower than him based on some of these picks. Yeah, exactly right. As a matter of fact, Eli Raridan's 2 highest receiving yards games are both higher than Kenyon Sadiq's 2 highest receiving yard games. But you know what Kenyon Sadiq was that Eli was not? He was more consistent. When healthy, he was more consistent, and that's what he needs. But yeah, I'm with you, Trev. If I'm going to take a tight end in the top 15, he needs to be Tyler Eifert pre-injury. He needs to be Brock Bowers. He needs to be like Kyle Pitts. He needs to be an absolute monster. And I just don't see any of those guys in this draft class. I honestly don't know if I see a first-round draft pick at tight end in this class, but Kenyon Sadiq had a phenomenal combine combined with good production, and some of his tape is really good. Like, there is some really good tape there for him. But, it's going to be very fascinating to see that. Very interesting. Any other thoughts, Trev? Like, I know the cornerback class gets a lot of talk. We haven't talked a lot about that. I think the LSU kid's probably a top 10 pick.
Delaney.
Yeah, he's a good football player.
He'll be in there. I mean, my overall thoughts of the draft class is it's very top heavy across the board at position groups. There's some that have to get, more hype. Like I think the wide receiver group is getting overhyped. I think the quarterback group is getting overhyped just because they have to. Like there's just not a whole lot of, you know what I mean? Like outside of Fernando Mendoza going over number 1 overall, like what are we talking about here? We're talking about 2 guys that underperformed in Cade Klubnik and Drew Aller. We're talking about Ty Simpson for now all of a sudden he's going to be a first-round pick.
Yeah.
You can miss me with that one. Who else are we talking about? Garrett Nussmeier?
Right.
Carson Beck. I don't know, man. I'm interested to see how this quarterback draft class goes.
You look at 100%, dude, big time. You look, Mendoza, I get going number 1. He's by far the best quarterback in a relatively weak quarterback class. It's not a great draft class overall. Raiders need a quarterback. Like, I get it. I have no problem with that. Just understand that you're not getting in my opinion, you're not getting a Josh Allen. You're not getting a Pat Mahomes. You're not getting by the way, neither of them were top 5 picks. You're not getting that kind of player in Fernando Mendoza. Just understand that. And if you can understand that, then I think you'll probably be happy with Fernando Mendoza because I think his floor is pretty high. I just don't think he has the ceiling of a traditional number one pick. But when you look at the rest of the draft class, I mean, Ty Simpson, number 2. I'm just going off of Daniel Jeremiah's positional rankings. But you got Ty Simpson at number 2. In no world in my opinion, is Ty Simpson the 36th best player in the draft. He may be the second best quarterback, but the 36th best player in the draft, and that's someone who I respect. He's got him, as far as a draft prospect, ranked ahead of some really good football players. And I just I don't get that one. But just looking at the draft class overall, he's got him number 2. He's got Carson Beck as the number 3 quarterback in this draft class. That's a kid who I'm very curious to see where he goes. Don't know if he'll be number 3 or number 4. I don't know that. But, there's some things about Carson Beck that people are going to like when they see the film. He's obviously won a lot of football games and played very well for Miami down the stretch of the regular season this year. I thought he battled his tail off against Ole Miss. He had a really bad late throw against Indiana, but he also had some really nice plays and nice throws against Indiana as well. How's he get viewed? Another guy that I'm intrigued by is Drew Aller, who has the number 94 overall player. This is Daniel Jeremiah, and he has him number 94 overall, which would be in the range of a late 3rd round draft pick. I'm sorry, I'm taking Carson. Somebody in the draft or in the chat just said Pilgrim for the King of Kings said, "Am I crazy for thinking Carson Beck's greater than Ty Simpson?" I would take Carson Beck and Drew Aller over Ty Simpson. No doubt about it. I would easily take both of them. And then after Drew Aller, there's another giant drop-off because now you're talking about Garrett Nussmeier, Cole Payton, the kid from North Dakota State. You're talking about Taylon Green. This is a really, really, in my opinion, historically bad draft class. I could see a world in which there's only one quarterback that becomes a full-time starter out of this draft class. I think Ty Simpson is exceptionally overrated.
Oh,
I don't think I would not take him in day 2 if I needed a quarterback. I would take him on day 3 early if I needed a backup, a good, dependable backup. I'm not drafting him as a starter.
No, no. Goodness, no, I'm not drafting him as a starter. I'm with you. This quarterback draft class, you have to draft based on tools. What tools does Ty Simpson possess that make him a starter at the next level? I mean, at least with Drew Aller, you can make fun of him for playing at Penn State, never won the big game, but he has the physical tools more so than Ty Simpson to be a good quarterback in the NFL than what Ty Simpson does. Drew Aller's 6'5",
had better teams at Penn State every year he played a full season. They were better than what Alabama was in the one season that Ty Simpson was the starter.
Oh, heck yeah. They didn't lose in their conference championship by 21. They didn't get booted from the playoffs by 35. And
they weren't losing the fight. Here's who Drew Aller lost to in his career. And this is why I think the kid gets a bum rap. Yes, I understand. He never beat the quote-unquote good teams. But here's who Drew Aller lost to as a starting quarterback. Let me just, this season, well, obviously, as we talked about, Trev, this season was just a fluky anomaly. But his first 2 years as a starter, they lost by 8 points at Ohio State. They lost to the national champion Michigan team by 9. They lost to number 9 Ole Miss in Jackson Dart in a bowl game. They lost to number 1 Ohio State by 7. They lost to Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, and then they lost to Notre Dame. And then his next loss was again to Oregon. Now, he didn't play well in some of those games. And then, of course, his last 2 games against UCLA and Northwestern. But that team quit after the Oregon game. That was one of the biggest collapses I've ever seen. That team just did not show up the next week. So, yeah, I get it. Drew Aller's got holes in his game and all that. But he's a 6'5", big-armed kid that is a pretty decent athlete coming into this. I'd take him over Ty Simpson any day of the week if I'm trying to take a flyer on a potential down-the-road starter. Same thing with Carson Beck. If I need just a pure backup, dependable, I want my next Chase Daniel. Sure, I'll take Ty Simpson in round 4 or 5. But as a starter, I'd take a flyer on one of those kids before I would take Ty Simpson. I do not get the love affair with Ty Simpson. He plays an incredibly quarterback-friendly offense and still didn't put up great numbers. I mean, 3,567 yards in 15 games, 7.5 yards per attempt, 28 touchdowns and 5 picks. I mean, I remember, people are picking Michael Penix apart and talking about how Michael Penix is, not a great player and all this other kind of stuff. Do you guys remember what Michael Penix did at Washington a couple of years ago? Like 8.8 yards per attempt, 4,900 passing yards, like way better player. 430 yards in the playoffs against Texas. So I don't get it. I do not get the love affair with Ty Simpson. And again, Trev, I don't see the great talent on film either. I don't see him making like NFL throws left and right. I just don't see it on film with him. I'm clearly missing something. And then the final piece is something you and I talked about last year, Trev. We would text back and forth. He's got the look. He's got the look.
If you're going to have the look on the road against a Florida State team coming off of a 2-10 season, what am I as a GM or a head coach going to expect of you on the road in Arrowhead or on the road in SoFi against the
Seattle?
Rams? Right.
You're going to go
in Seattle, home of the 12th man. You know what I mean? Like what happens then? You playing on the road against Pittsburgh when you're facing the Steelers, and then they got that Styx song that plays at the end of every third quarter. Like you're not going to get the look then, but you had it on the road against Florida State, a 5-7 team. Like, man, because there's look, we can be real about something. There's some quarterbacks that just play on bad teams that you can project up to the next level where it's like, hey, like I know, like a lot of people did that with Jimmy Clausen. Now, obviously, like his injuries plagued him, and he went to, we understand how his career panned out. But that was somebody with the level of talent that Jimmy Clausen had, not panning out. And like we're talking about somebody, Ty Simpson, who like there would be games where they would win in spite of him. There would be games that they were competitive in spite of him. Now, the one thing I will say, he didn't get, I was waiting for it, and he didn't get the look against Oklahoma on the road in the playoffs. He didn't. I will always give
down
credit
17-0.
Yeah,
right
on the road at Night in Norman. But you can't look at that one performance and be like, that's just who he's going to be for the rest of his career. Then when you combine that with just kind of above average tools, I don't want to make it sound like he's like a dud in the backfield and he's not a playmaker or anything, like he can't throw farther than 40 yards. It's not like that, but it's just
he's got a nice arm. I just don't see like I've seen, he can make every NFL throw. I'm like, well, kind of. I don't know. I say he makes them impressive. And there's some people in the chat asking, what do you mean by the look? Well, we're talking about the look is just like the deer in headlights. I'm a little shook. I'm not going to be able to make a play. Yeah. Overwhelmed by the moment, overwhelmed by the opponent. Just, you know what I mean? Like, and he didn't get it the first game against Georgia. He definitely had it in the second game against Georgia, where, he would hit. And so what does the look mean? It's not just the look. It's the look explains the play. Because you'd see him rushing reads, not getting the ball out to open receivers because he's panicking, getting out of the pocket too soon. Just not having that ability to calm yourself, calm your team, and go make a play. And you'd see that in games, Trev, where he just did not have that. And yeah. No, we're not saying that publicly. But no, but the look was, if the look like I had a guy I knew that said Brady Quinn always looked like a deer in headlights. I was like, no, that's just how Brady always looked.
Stoic.
Like Brady always kind of had that look on his face, and then he'd throw darts. This is a change of, okay, this is different. He looked shook. And then what was the level of play that followed? That's what we're talking about.
If you want an example of the differences of how it looks, go back and watch, and I'm sure you can tune into the ACC network and find it. Go back to the Notre Dame Miami game and look at CJ Carr's face taking the field for the first time in the second quarter or in the second half. Down big on the road against Miami when they needed to mount a comeback. Go look at CJ Carr's face versus what Ty Simpson's face looked like the day before on the road.
His body language, his delivery. Somebody said he played well against Oklahoma both times. You're falling in love with the numbers. Go watch him take sacks he had no business taking in the second half of the Oklahoma game. Lost the first time. Missing reads, missing throws. Like, you got to stop looking at the numbers. Now, second Oklahoma game, as Trevor already said, he played better that game, and he didn't have the look. First time at home, he absolutely did, which is why that offense just faltered down the stretch. I don't know that I blame him for Indiana because he just was he was literally overwhelmed by the Indiana defense. I don't even fault him for that one. But he absolutely had that look in way too many games last year. Way too many games. So that's why I just don't see it with Ty Simpson. Now, I think Drew Aller gets the look too. That's why I'm not advocating for him being a first-round draft pick. I'm just saying if I'm taking a flyer on a guy at late day 2, yeah. I'm not doing it.
Oh, I'm with you completely. And then unfortunately, like some of the other guys in this draft class that like don't get the look kind of don't have like the physical tools to like excel that much at the next level. Like Luke Altmaier is a guy that, I mean, he played at Illinois. He's used to playing on the road against Ohio State and playing against big opponents, things like that. But he never got the look. It's just he doesn't necessarily have like the tools to be a first-round NFL draft pick. So like that's what this class is. You know what I mean? Like that's what this quarterback draft class is. It's a lot of projection. You have to push it forward. I think Fernando Mendoza is he's the clear-cut front runner of this class. But even then, you could argue, would Fernando Mendoza be the clear-cut front runner in the 2027 NFL draft class? No. From talent,
no, but Francisco would be though.
He would be. He would be. Oh man,
Francisco Mendoza is a baller. He'd be the number 1 pick next year too.
He would be.
Yep. He'd be a baller, straight baller. Yeah, Trev. This quarterback class is really weak, and it's going to make talking about the 27 draft class a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Any other? Here's what I hear. So just we'll wrap it up with this, Trev, as we get into our talk about the SEC. I think tonight is going to go one of two ways. Basically, just chalk all the way down. Like everything is like, yeah, somebody had that guy being mocked there. We understand that one. Not a lot of trades, not a lot of movement. And if there is movement, it's teams trying to trade out, not necessarily a bunch of teams trying to jump way up. Or it's going to be bonkers with a lot of trades or, wait a minute, they took who? So-and-so's now we're down to 13. We're going to Bo Callahan fall from, you know what I mean? Like it's going to be one or the other, in my opinion, Trev. And I don't know which one it's going to be, but I just feel like it's not going to be like a normal draft. You got some that make sense and some that are surprises. I think it's just going to be an absolute bonkers year. Absolute bonkers year. So, yeah, going to be fun. Can't wait. And just so people know, I'll probably record some videos breaking down the draft picks this weekend. We won't do a full draft recap show until Monday. Trevor and I are going to talk about the 26 NFL draft recap on Monday. Then we will kind of take a look at the 27 draft class next on Monday and then do some other things on Monday as well. So we're very much looking forward to that. And just a reminder too, before we get here to part 3, Trev, we will have a post-game show tomorrow as well. Depending on when it starts, we may have some breaking news during the show. Who knows? We'll see.
Brian, getting to the final part of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We're broadening the scope. We're bringing things back to college football. Just got done talking about the NFL draft. And what we're starting today is kind of like basically a 4-part series breaking down the Power 4 conferences and our overall thoughts on them as a whole now that they're getting out of spring. Obviously, we're going to wait to do Notre Dame's until after their spring practice is over. The Blue and Gold game is this Saturday. Can't wait for that one. But right now, we're going to be looking at the SEC, and we're kind of breaking this down into like 3 different buckets, and we're going to follow this format for the other conferences that we're going to be doing. And first, we're going to talk storylines. We're going to talk about some teams that we like coming out of spring, and then some teams that we have some questions about coming out of the spring. Some either remaining questions, like we'll have some remaining questions about Notre Dame coming out of the spring, common theme for us in some of those, or some new questions that have arisen and based off of some of the things that we've seen from spring out of the SEC teams. So it's going to be a fun one.
And to make our buddy Insured by Big happy, we're going to totally talk trash about LSU the entire time and talk about how bad they suck and how terrible they are, just to make Insured by Big feel better.
Well, I'm not
kidding.
talking
We're
about
not going to
LSU.
actually do
We don't have a sucks category, so I'm going to share that one for later in the offseason.
We will talk about LSU, but I think you'll appreciate. I don't know if you'll like it or not like it, but you'll appreciate our conversation about LSU. But when we talk about sort of getting into Trevor, the storylines of the SEC, and there's a lot of quarterback storylines, and they go in two different directions. And the first one that we want to talk about is the fact that there have been some decisions made at quarterback this spring, Trev. There have been some players that have won quarterback jobs this spring, one of which is Austin Simmons at Missouri. I don't know that there was an actual major competition at Kentucky, but you wanted to see that Kenny Minchie was going to say, okay, yeah, we made the right decision going out and getting Kenny Minchie. I think that was kind of a part of the process as well. So there's at least two important quarterback decisions made this spring, one of which was expected. The other, honestly, ended a little sooner than I expected, and that was the battle between Austin Simmons and Matt Zollers. And coming out of spring, Coach Drinkwitz was very adamant, Austin Simmons is our starting quarterback. That was a bit of a surprise for me, Trevor. Was it because Matt Zollers didn't play as well, or did Austin Simmons get back to looking like the guy we thought he was going to be last year before the injuries?
Yeah, that one was in. The most intriguing thing about that, to your point, was the timing. Now, if we would have today, if the news would have broke today and you would have told me that Austin Simmons was a starting quarterback at Missouri, I would have been like, yeah, that doesn't shock me. Would have liked to have seen Matt Zollers make a little bit more of a push. But the fact that it happened, a week into spring training? And they're like, hey, Austin Simmons is the guy. That's who we're rolling with. Now, from a structural standpoint for Missouri season, I like that they're giving now a guy the bulk of the offseason to be their number one guy. You can formulate your offense around him. But I'm with you. That one was surprising.
Yeah. We'll see how it turns out. I'm curious how Matt Zollers is going to respond to it. Do you just keep battling, knowing, hey, I'm just a sophomore, I'm good. I wasn't necessarily thinking I was going to be a freshman starter anyway. He came to Missouri knowing they had Bo Prabula and some other guys, Sam Horn and some older guys. So I don't know that he came thinking I'm going to start as a freshman. That was a lot due to multiple injuries. Sam Horn gets hurt in the opener. Bo Prabula gets knocked around a little bit. So maybe Matt's a little bit more patient. And honestly, I think he needs a little bit more time. I'm not actually upset that they didn't go with him. I'm just surprised they didn't go with him, because it's like a lot of teams nowadays are kind of going with that young guy, but there's a reason they went out and got Austin Simmons out of the portal.
And he's backing up a guy that needed replaced last year because of an injury. So that's also something that I keep in mind. And no, that I'm not rooting for anybody to be hurt, but that's the reality of his situation. Is that's what paved the way for Trinidad Chambliss to come in and take over as a starter. He got his opportunity and never let go of the job. So Matt Zollers is in a spot where his obituary has not been written at Missouri. He's still a very young player. I'm with you. I think he still has some things he has to improve on. So
in a perfect world, I think he gets the red shirt back that he lost last year. Don't play him more than 4 games. I think that would be wise, unless obviously the NCAA changes the rule for the 5 years to play 5 seasons, 5-5 rule, then it doesn't matter. So those are things. And then obviously we'll see Kenny Minchie starting in Kentucky. He'll be the guy at Kentucky. Had some nice throws in the spring game, had a couple misses, but I think overall from what I saw from the game, he performed well. So you've got that. Now, the other quarterback conversation, Trevor's, there's a lot of quarterback battles that have not been decided. So we as Notre Dame analysts and evaluators and podcasters and writers and all the other different hats that we wear covering Notre Dame football, Trev, we know what a good old quarterback battle is about. We went through that last year. There are 4 programs right now for sure that are going, I should say 4 spotlight programs that are going into this season with a quarterback battle. We are not going to talk about LSU because I don't view LSU as a battle. I view that as just Sam Leavitt's going to be the starter whenever he comes back, unless he's too hurt, he's just not healthy. So I think the battle at LSU is more of a who's next in line if Sam Leavitt doesn't play well or gets hurt. So we're not going to talk about LSU. We're going to talk about 4 teams here, Trev. And the first one I want to talk about is Alabama. If you're an Alabama fan, I think this spring, from what we've seen and what we've read, went about as well as you could hope for, in that no quarterback emerged as the guy, but it was more about because both did some really good things as opposed to neither did. It's kind of like where Notre Dame was last year, where you didn't have a starter named after the spring, not because, well, CJ wasn't very good and Kenny was even worse, or vice versa. It was like CJ did some really good things and Kenny did some really good things. We need to let these kids continue this battle. And I think that's what happened at Alabama this spring as well. Depending on who you talk to, some people will say Austin Mack is ahead because he was better for most of the spring. Other people, it's Keelan Russell because he was better in the spring game. I would imagine that Kalen DeBoer, if he's a smart coach, puts a lot more emphasis on what happened in the first 14 practices than he does the spring game. But it was still good to see him make some of those plays. But then you watch the game, and there's about 4 or 5 of his big plays that aren't happening in a real game. Like there was one touchdown pass he threw where literally he slide steps, the guy runs right by him because he can't hit him. He then slide steps, throws the ball to a guy after the defender had stopped running because he thought the guy was sacked, and that's a touchdown pass. Well, that's not happening in a game. But you could also see the tools. The seam route he threw off his back foot.
Yeah.
You're like, that's a heck of a throw. Now, I don't think that's getting complete against Notre Dame or, Georgia, because I think KJ Bolden's kind of, but you just see the arm talent, Trev, and you're like, man, that talent is legit. So that battle continues. But if you're an Alabama fan, I would think that you're like, hey, I don't know who's going to win that job, but, bro, these are both guys can win us a lot of football games. That's how I would feel if I was an Alabama fan, which is how we felt as Notre Dame fans last year. Like, look, I don't know. I know who I wanted to start. Obviously, we wanted CJ to be starter. We thought he had the higher ceiling. But we also both said, Kenny Minshew can take you to the college football playoffs, fellas. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no doubt Kenny can take you there. And that's how I feel. Keelan Russell is the guy that has the higher ceiling, the more upside, the more talent. But if Austin Mack is your guy, he can win you a lot of football games and take you to the college football playoffs. So you're kind of in a win-win, in my opinion, Trev. That was my takeaway from Alabama's quarterback battle this spring.
Yeah, Alabama fans should find a lot of solace in the fact that whoever gets named QB1, that job will be earned. Because neither guy's letting go of the reins yet. And that's what you want out of a good competition. You don't want somebody to win by default. Like, you're clearly the better guy because the other guy didn't come to play. We talked about that a lot last year with Notre Dame's quarterback battle, and it's not an issue down in Tuscaloosa. It's a really, really good spot. Really good spot, man.
Yep. And then, of course, there's a quarterback battle in Florida that is yet to be decided, and that is the battle between Aaron Philo and Tramel Jones, who is a redshirt freshman at Florida this year. That one seems to also have been undecided. I'm a little surprised by that one, Trev. I haven't seen this Florida spring game yet, so I don't know if they're just wanting to see Aaron Philo really win over the team, maybe. I don't know if that's the case. I just kind of felt that Philo was going to kind of come in and seize hold of that one so far. And then what we got to find out is why did he not seize hold of the job? Is it just that they want to see him maybe John Sumrall is like, Aaron hasn't won over the locker room yet, and I need him to do that before we can name him the starting quarterback. Maybe it's something like where, like, look, he still has some things he's learning because he's not a guy that's played a ton of football. Or C, it could be Aaron Philo's doing exactly what you hoped he would, but Tramel Jones is having a heck of a spring. Which one of those three is it? That I don't know, and that's going to determine whether this ends up being a good thing for Florida or a concerning thing for Florida.
From some of the things that I read, it sounds like they're getting more of a push from Tramel Jones than what they initially thought that they were going to get, which is, again, it's what you want. Because, one, if Aaron Philo ends up winning the job and he's your certified starter, then you have a very, very, very quality backup in Tramel Jones. Like, that's the situation that Notre Dame was in last year. If CJ Carr went down, you knew that you had a really, really good backup quarterback in Kenny Minshew that could run the offense and lead you to the playoffs. Ceiling yet to be determined. And I think that's a little bit of what Florida's going through, because I think they're getting a little bit more of a push from him. And it's my understanding that Philo's still kind of in pole position leaving spring, but I think it's Jones' emergence that's making this one a little bit more interesting.
There's another one, Trev, that's very interesting, and that is the battle at Tennessee. And I'll have more to say about what this means for their entire team here when we get to the next segment. But when I look at this battle, Trev, it's still George McIntyre Jr. against Faison Brandon, who honestly, for the first several months of him as a recruit, I literally thought his name was Brandon Faison. I just kept like, those my bad. But Faison Brandon, he's an immensely talented player. And George McIntyre is a talented player. From what I've read, it sounds like George McIntyre's out in front from a consistency standpoint, but he hasn't really seized the job like they hoped he would. And Faison Brandon has been a lot flashier. It almost sounds like a Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr scenario where, and I mean, it's the same class, redshirt sophomore going up against or a redshirt freshman going up against a true freshman kind of situation. Like that's a very similar situation to what Notre Dame went through last year, where the veteran just didn't quite, you needed to get some distance between you and that really stud young buck on the team. And did George McIntyre do enough of that? Now, the counter to that is George McIntyre is still very young. He's a redshirt freshman. He's still a young player. He's still a guy that with a good offseason in the weight room could maybe take that next jump as a player. This offseason is going to be huge because the winner of this battle is going to, and how and why is going to have a big impact on this team. And we'll talk more about that later. But if I'm in Faison Brandon's camp, I'm feeling like I got a shot at this going into the fall based on some of the things that I've read about how the two perform this spring. It's going to be very interesting, but this is a big one. I mean, these are three premier programs in the league that have a lot of uncertainty at the quarterback position, but also a lot of talent at the quarterback position. So it's not like two bums are going against each other and you're like, I don't know which one of these average quarterbacks is going to win the job. These are talented players. It's just, will these coaches go with experience over youth and the upside, or experience over talent? Meaning like the young guy might have more physical tools, but he's not ready to run the offense as well, which doesn't make him a better quarterback. It just means he looks better throwing it and spinning it and those type of things. And that's what Marcus Freeman needed CJ Carr to do last fall, and he did that, stepped in and played beautifully. Will the young guys do that at Florida, at Tennessee, at Alabama, or will the also talented vets win some of these jobs? Big storylines for me in the SEC. And how that pans out is going to determine if these three teams can be contenders for playoff spots this year, or even in not so much Florida, but in the case of Tennessee and Alabama, a potential SEC championship game berth.
Or do they follow the model of what Notre Dame and Clemson did in 2018, where it's like, hey, you give the veteran the keys to the car to start the season with the idea that the younger guy is going to come in and take over eventually down the stretch in the season if these quarterback battles have to go beyond fall camp. Be very interested to see how that pans out too. I think there's some viable options. Like a team like Alabama wouldn't surprise me. Would not surprise me in the slightest if Austin Mack won the starting job and he trotted out there the first couple weeks. But by the time the Iron Bowl rolls around, we're talking about what Keelan Russell has to do to get the win for Alabama in that one. So very interested to see what they can do there, man. Very interested.
One last one to mention, and we're going to mention this one last because I think this is more of an inevitability. And I think this is more about Clark Lee massaging the locker room and expectations a little bit more, but that's Jared Curtis at Vanderbilt. Has not been named the starter post-spring. I would imagine that they want to see him continue to mature, learn the offense, prove to be, are you capable of being a leader as a rookie? And then also taking some of the pressure off of him of being named the starter this early. I would not, unless he's just so much better than the other players in running the offense, I'm not completely opposed to maybe letting Jared Curtis kind of have the Riley Leonard treatment. Or not Riley Leonard, Trevor Lawrence treatment, where, you start somebody else early on, bring him off the bench, and then let him take over in rounds, games 4 or 5. The counter to that, however, is you got Austin Peay, Delaware, and NC State your first 3 games. So there's at least a couple games where like he can kind of get his feet wet, struggle, and you're still going to win the football game. Because then it's like, if you don't do that, well, what game are you going to start him against? Is it Auburn on the road, Georgia on the road, Ole Miss, Arkansas, at Kentucky, at Mississippi State, Alabama, at Florida, Tennessee? Like, when's the breaking him in moment going to happen? But I just think this is actually smart by Clark Lee to not rush his crowning and just keep him humble, keep him working, help the locker room continue to more and more embrace the idea of this is the guy we're going behind because he's earned it, not because you paid him a bunch of money to come there. I think that's very important. but he will be the starting quarterback at Vanderbilt in 2026, barring injury. It's just, when will that happen? Will it be early fall camp, late fall camp, week 3, week 6? Like, that's the question. And if I had to guess, Trev, it's going to be sometime in fall camp, like probably early to mid fall camp.
Makes sense. They're going to need him to be that. I mean, one of the questions that we have is, how does, well, I don't want to spoil anything that we'll talk about here soon, but they're going to need a solidified quarterback in. And I think Jared Curtis is going to be the guy coming out the winner. I'm with you. Let's talk about Texas, and let's talk about the Longhorns, because they're one of the favorites in the league they are the favorite right now in FanDuel to win the SEC. And they're a team that's caught a lot of attention this past throughout the offseason. Let's talk about their outlook and what we've learned from them over the spring too.
Yeah, a big part of it, Trevor, is, we'll see how it plays out in the spring. But the one thing I kept hearing and reading, and I'm looking forward to watching, trying to get get some film of their spring game here soon. But it sounds like Will Muschamp has brought a much more aggressive attacking kind of pressure defense to Texas, which I think they need to do. They've got a very athletic linebacker room. They've got a very talented defensive line, especially on the edge. I think they have the best defensive end in college football this year, at least as of right now. I know that I think you agree with me on that, or he's at least in your top 2 to 3. I think Colin Simmons is the best returning defensive end in college football.
I do as well.
And so you've got a good secondary, but not a great one. And it's the position that I have more questions than any other position on their defense is secondary. Take some of the coverage burden off of them by heating teams up. And from reports that it's gone well so far, that the players have taken to it. They really like the aggressiveness. I was reading an article, I think it was from On3 or 247 today, where you had some quotes from players talking about, like, it's clicked for us. They've made it, learnable. We love flying around. We're making a lot of plays. I think that's going to be a big key. Obviously, the offensive line for Texas is going to be important, but we're really not going to know how good that is, Trevor, until we get to the season. So that's kind of a storyline that's been there for a couple of years. This one I think is interesting because this tells us a little bit about a philosophical change that's happened in Texas that I think was needed. And maybe that explains why Steve Sarkisian made the movie Made to get rid of a Coach Kwiatkowski, who 2 years ago had Texas as a top 5 to 7 defense, and they were in the college football playoff semifinals. Maybe he realized, yeah, he did a good job, but we've peaked under him. We're not going to be any better than that. If we want to win it all, we've got to get someone that's going to attack and go after teams and try to wreak havoc for our elite offense. And I think if you're talking about the kind of offense I expect Texas to have, I don't think Texas has had an elite offense under Sark. And I think you needed that shut down, ball control, bend but don't break defensive system. You should, from here on out, have a really dynamic offense. I don't need you to hold teams at 3 points a game. I need you to go get the ball back. And yeah, I'll be willing to take some chances, because if you take a chance and get beat, don't worry. We got Arch and Raleek Brown and Hollywood Smothers and Cam Coleman and Emmett Mosley and Ryan Wink. Like, we're going to be fine. We're going to be able to get that back, kind of like we feel about Notre Dame. So I think this kind of style works, and it worked for Notre Dame. I mean, it's without looking at the scheme, just philosophically, it's kind of the approach that Al Golden brought to the table. So we're going to throw a lot of stuff at you offensively. We're going to come at you. We're going to attack you. We're going to try to get to the quarterback. We'll see if it works. People saying in chat, I'm not a big fan of Will Muschamp. Never have been. What I am a fan of is I think this philosophy that he's bringing is needed at Texas. And if he can execute it at Texas the way Al Golden executed at Texas or at Notre Dame, then all of a sudden Texas won't be a team that's getting a lot of hype. They'll be a legitimate, like, real title contender, not one that on paper, roster-wise, should be, but one that, they're going to be a problem for people this year.
Agreed. I'm going to talk about Texas a little bit later, more so the team encompassing, but I'm with you. It sounds like defensively they've simplified some certain things to let their athletes go be athletes and to go make plays, and that's something that they absolutely needed to do. I'm with you completely. Let's talk about one of their biggest rivals in Oklahoma. And Brian, I know this is a team that you've been pretty high on over the course of the offseason. You think they're going to be better than what they were last year. And one of the bigger storylines, and some of it is what we expected it to be. So this is a little bit more confirming like an initial hypothesis that we had about the Sooners going into the offseason, is that they're looking real good in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And that's something that they're going to need to be this season.
Yeah, I mean, this is reports from what we've seen so far. We've had a couple reports of a couple defensive linemen really stepping up into important roles, which is important. You know, Taylor Wynn comes back, David Stone comes back, but they lose R. Mason Thomas and a couple other, key parts of their defensive line. They needed some guys to step up this spring, kind of like we've talked about with Notre Dame, right? I mean, yeah, you lose Emil Wagner, Billy Stroud. Yeah, there's talent there, but will those guys step up into the starting lineups? Yeah, you lose Malachi Fields. You've got talent there, but are those guys ready to kind of step into that role? Well, that's kind of where Oklahoma was on the defensive line. They needed some guys to really step up and say, hey, now's my turn. And it sounds like at least in spring that's happened. And, from what I can tell, it does sound like the offensive line has certainly made strides, better running the football, a little better in pass pro this spring. I think that's going to be important because that's going to be the key to Oklahoma this season. So hearing that, you're like, okay, at least for spring, box checked. Now let's see if they can carry it in the fall, because that's where a lot of my optimism about Oklahoma comes from. We'll talk about them more in a little bit, but that's a big one. And then another thing, Trevor, is I've seen some people taking shots at Lane Kiffin for basically saying, hey, like, folks, we need to be a little bit patient here. But I think that's absolutely the stance he needs to be taking right now.
I think you could take it one of two ways. And like we see with a lot of fan bases and college football fans, the extremes kind of get played out on both sides. On one hand, it's like, patient, why are you not the team that we thought we were going to be? Are we not going to be good? Oh, gosh, we suck. People shouldn't be talking to us about the playoffs. And the other side of that is like, hey, just a little bit of tampering expectations. I think it's a little bit more the latter. There's a lot of people talk about LSU being in the top 10 and what kind of run they can make in the playoffs under Lane Kiffin. So that's how I took it. But there's a lot of pieces that have to come together here. I brought it up when we talked about LSU and some of our, I believe we were doing a midway point spring top 25 or going over somebody else's top 25 or something. And we talked a lot about LSU, and they're a team that, fact of the matter is they have 23 players, 23 transfer portal players within their two deep on both sides of the ball combined. Yeah. That's not something that comes together in 15 spring practices.
Right.
That they're not going to look like the team that they're going to look like in October on April 15th. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot of Kiffin's comments were kind of rooted in. And like, hey, we don't have to be ready to go out and win the national championship today. That's going to be something that we do over the course of the fall. LSU is going to be one of those teams, along with another team that I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, that you're not going to want to play them in November.
Mm-hmm. Potentially.
Exactly. Once they start to gel, but right now they don't have to be completely gelled together because it's spring just ended. You still have all of summer. You still have fall camp to go through. So that is, at least for me, how I took those comments, but I think one that it needed to be said.
Yeah, I don't know. Did I say somebody other than Lane Kiffin? Somebody said that I mean, did I say Lincoln Riley or something like that? But obviously I meant Lane Kiffin talking about him. But I think it's one of those things where I think LSU has a talented roster. I don't think it's as talented as some people are making it out to be. Like that's kind of my pushback a little bit on this is I think LSU has a chance to be a top 10 football team this year. But with some of the talk, you kind of get the impression like LSU could maybe have one of the 3 or 4 best rosters of college football. And I think people are underestimating the damage that Brian Kelly did to that roster and that program the last couple of years. I really think that they are, because Lincoln Riley's not going to the portal for a ton of new players because he just wants to. He's going to the portal for those because he has to. Because in my opinion, Brian Kelly did a very poor job of constructing that roster. And then obviously they had some departures after he left. So, when I look at this team, like you said, Trev, it's like there's this website, Our Lads, and it gives you current depth charts. And it's not always like the most super accurate, but I look at it because it does a good job of the transfers are in orange and returners are in blue. And you look at the 2 deep on the offense at LSU, and there's 6 blue guys in 22 out of 22. The rest are portal guys. And then there's 5 portal guys in the 3rd team. And the defense has 5 portal guys starting. And it could end up being even more than that, depending on Fahim Delaney can step up. If Stefan Green can maybe step in the starting lineup. Guys like that. So they're going to be a really good team, in my opinion, this year, Trev. But it's like, let's pump the brakes in April on us being the kind of team that Notre Dame is talking about, Ohio State's talking about, Texas is talking about, because like those teams are established, those cultures are established, those depth charts are established. Their transfers are plugging into new holes where we're basically starting from scratch offensively in a lot of ways. And so I think that's where he comes from. I think LSU fans do need to be a little bit patient. And when I mean patient, I don't mean they need to be patient like, hey, guys, you're going to go 8-4 this year, so chill out and just be okay with it, because in 2027, you're going to be really good. What I mean is even if LSU's winning games early, it may not be pretty. But also, their start of their schedule is brutal. They have Clemson, Ole Miss on the road, and Texas A&M at home in 3 of their first 4 games. They're not going to look like world beaters on offense most likely in September. As long as they win all but one of those games, they can afford a loss that early. If you go 2-1 against those 3 teams, then you got McNeese State coming up. That's when you can kind of start to figure it out. You just got to weather that early storm, but just understanding that this team is not most likely going to come out and be a 40-plus point per game team right out of the gate with a bunch of new guys and a tough schedule. Just give them time to kind of establish this thing and put this team together. But because he's not just fixing an offense and a defense, Trevor, because he doesn't have to fix the defense. You have the same coordinator. You're fixing a culture that was in shambles when he took over. And sometimes that's going to take more than one spring to fix. So that's why I think his pump in the brakes was coming from. I didn't take it as like, hey, guys, we're going to be 8-4, so just brace yourselves. It's just more of like, I'm hearing a lot of like, boy, you know, just relax. Relax. Give us time to get this thing going. And like that's going to be key. You got to weather that early storm. That's going to be a big part of it. Like, but do they have a true number 1 receiver? And if not, are they going to be okay with that? Like, I don't know that Notre Dame's going to have a number 1 receiver, but but Notre Dame's doing it with a lot of new guys, with a couple guys fit in. You got a bunch of new guys fitting around. J.C. Watkins or J.C. Brown, who you and I are both very high on, Winston Watkins, Jackson Harris, Trey Brown, Eugene Wilson, Malik Elzy. New faces and new places. And how does that come together? And that's going to take more than 15 practices for it to come together, especially when they have yet to take a snap in an 11-on-11 situation with their expected starting quarterback. It's just going to take a little bit of time, but LSU's going to be okay. Like if Lane Kiffin can win at Ole Miss, he's definitely going to win at LSU. Just be patient. Be patient.
Yeah, pump the brakes is a good kind of term that I think of when I talk about LSU and kind of their outlook on the season. I think they're going to be good. And I talked about how I thought earlier in the season, I thought they were going to be one of my teams out of the SEC to make the playoffs, but they don't have to make the playoffs tomorrow. And I think that's kind of the core of where Lane Kiffin was coming from. I'm with you.
Yep.
Another team that's interesting, Brian, one of the other storylines is Vanderbilt. And I know we already talked about kind of their quarterback situation that's been going on this offseason, not necessarily as much of a competition as some of the other schools like Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida. But one big question is how much of a step back are the Commodores going to take this year? I think they have the right guy in place at head coach with Clark Lee, and they have a talented roster, but they lost a lot of experience last year. The heart and soul of their team, whether you love him or you hate him, was Diego Pavia. He was kind of that energy and that fuel that got that team going. They believed in him as a starting quarterback. Then when you factor in they're losing some other guys like Eli Stowers and players like that, it's what is their season going to look like? I don't think they're going to be a team that goes like 4-8 now because they lost Diego Pavia, but I also don't know if they're going to be a 9-win team and hovering in the middle teens of the AP poll either every single week. So that's going to be an interesting one.
It is. Look, they're going to take a step back this year. I don't think that's a question mark. I don't think that's that's a reality. The big question is how big of a step back. And I think that's going to be a storyline. And honestly, nothing this spring kind of answered that question for me. So that's one of my storylines is Vanderbilt's got some tools. They've recruited well, portal well, but I think they're one of the bigger unknowns. Are they step back 9-3 or are they step back 4-8 or anywhere, obviously anywhere in between? That's going to be an interesting. And then the last one, Trevor, one of the big storylines too is Texas A&M a year ago, you knew exactly what they were going to be in the trenches and they were going to carry that team, and they did. Now, fast forward a year later, still big question marks up front on both sides of the ball for the Aggies.
Yeah, they're one of my teams that I have a question about, man. I mean, I don't know what to look at. I can't coin this as my own because this is something that you brought up to me on the phone. But if this was a 7-on-7 tournament, I'd feel real good about Texas A&M. I'd probably put a little bit of money on them to win the whole thing. But a Mike Elko-led team is mainly built in the trenches and having a dynamic playmaker quarterback. I think that's a common theme that we've seen from the teams that he's led between Duke and having Riley Leonard, and then what he's done with Marcel Reed the last 2 seasons. The trenches, though, there have been some big losses over the last 2 years for them. Basically, they lost their entire defensive line before the start of the 2025 season. They had some other guys step up, and they were pretty decent. And then after the 2025 season, they lost their entire starting offensive line. And so you're going through major losses in back-to-back years. And they're a team that coming out of the spring, to your point, that's one of the teams that I have a major question about still. What are they going to be? Especially with the back half of their schedule. They're going through a gauntlet in November. Mm-hmm. You're going to need your trenches to be developed. And now the bright side is they don't have their November slate in September. So it's not like their offensive line is going to have to be surefire, sure thing, ready to go from the opening kickoff. They don't have Notre Dame scheduled to start the year like they did last year. But it's going to be really interesting to see how that all comes together. And I think that's going to make or break their season. I think Texas A&M is a playoff contender, and I think that they're a contender to win the division in year 3 under Mike Elko. Got to get the trenches shored up, though, and from what I've seen and from what I've read from them in the spring, that question just hasn't been answered.
Not at all. Yeah, there's still definite question marks, and I said it before, Trev. My biggest question with Texas A&M was I did not love I understood they were going to have to rebuild their offensive line through the portal. I understood that. I understood why. It's a tough place to be in. You inherited a very veteran offensive line, not a lot of great depth behind it. I get all that. My concern is it's not even that you had to go to the portal. It's who you got out of the portal. That was as much of a question for me as anything. They got some guys that I'm like, yeah, I don't know that that's going to answer that problem. I'll say I'm a lot more confident the defensive line is going to be okay than I am the offensive line. That's the bigger question mark for me. And I think that could lead us to the conversation about Marcel Reed we had the other day. That's going to be a big factor in kind of how that one's treated. Yeah, the offensive line could end up being the downfall of that offense or him. Or they figure it out by the time they get to games that matter and they're at least serviceable, and then you let the talent take over in the skill positions.
Yeah, I'm with you on the defensive line. I mean, they still have DJ Hicks coming back, TJ Searcy comes back, Sam Mpemba comes back, Marco Jones comes back. Going to be relying on a couple of transfers in the 2 deep and potentially the starting lineup, but on the offensive line, it is all completely built through the portal. Your only returning quote-unquote starter is Mark Naboo, who has had injury history in the last couple of seasons, which is why he hasn't consistently been in the starting lineup. So I'm with you there, man. Texas A&M is going to be real interesting to follow. In the final part of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're kind of rolling on with the college football talk, and we're talking about the SEC. And we've already kind of talked about some of the key storylines here. Now we're going to kind of go through, some of the teams that we like, some of the teams that we still have questions about now that spring has concluded for them. And, Brian, where we start with this one, look, at the end of the day, there's only so much that you can learn about a team through 15 spring practices. You can draw conclusions, you can project out. You still have the majority of the offseason to go. But there are some teams in here at the top that we like, and some of it's a little bit of confirmation bias of like, hey, this was our hypothesis going into spring, and through their first 15 practices of the offseason, they've done these things that I like, answered some of these questions, and some of them we've already talked about. But first and foremost, before we dive into the teams, man, I think that's where we have to start with this, is there's still the bulk of the offseason to go. It's not the end-all, be-all talking about the teams that we like. And it's also not the death sentence for teams that we have questions about. There's still a long way to go before they have to be game ready.
Yeah, there's no question. But it's one of those things where, coming out of the spring, these are the teams that we believe have positioned themselves to say, hey, we're going to be a player this year, or hey, we've answered some questions this year. And that's kind of where we are. And Trev, it starts obviously down in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, man. I mean, Texas is one of those programs that we were extremely high on coming into the offseason. And a lot of that talk was around the offense. It was Arch Manning going into year 2. They get Cam Coleman out of the portal. Ryan Wingo is going to be a year older. So we liked a lot of what they had going on down in Austin. But the biggest emergence, and one thing that makes me feel a lot more confident about them, is for something we talked about before, and is the outlook of their defense. Will Muschamp coming in, I did not love that hire. I thought firing Pete Kwiatkowski was just kind of the scapegoat for the lack of production that they had on offense. They didn't lose the Red River Shootout because of their defense. That's for sure. Or I believe that who won the Red River Shootout last year? That was Texas did win it. They beat Oklahoma
convincingly.
26. Yeah. But their issues last year were not on defense, in my opinion. But Steve Sarkisian can't fire himself, and he was the offensive coordinator. He was the offensive play caller. And so when I go and I look at what Texas did so far this offseason, they simplified their defense. I think they're doing things to make up for their lack of playmakers on the back end. Because over the last 2 years, you've lost Andrew Makuba, you've lost Malik Muhammad, you've lost playmakers like that. And the outlook of their secondary this year is not as high as it was in 24 or in 2025. So what you needed to do was simplify the defense. You needed to attack more. And the goal for Will Muschamp is simple: get the ball back into the hands of Arch Manning and that offense with those weapons. And I think they're doing a great job of that. I think the outlook of their running back room is what we hoped that it was going to be this offseason. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I really like the outlook at Texas, man. I really do.
Yeah, and look, obviously there's still some growth that Cam Coleman's got to make in the offense, but that's going smooth. The reports are good that the offensive line has made strides. Melvin Ciani from the Wake Forest transfers kind of fit in pretty well. That's going to be the key. And that, to me, that's why Texas is on this list for me, Trev, is because it seems like their offensive line is at least showing growth and improvement, and that's the thing that held them back last year. That and injuries at wide receiver. And I don't know that you had like a number one receiver, like a true game changer. Well, now you do in Cam Coleman. And now Ryan Wingo doesn't have to be that guy. He can be a complement to it. Emmett Mosley doesn't have to be that guy. He can be a complement to it. And then, of course, I think that this defensive line is going to take a big jump this year. I thought there was a little bit too much put on this team last year, on that unit last year with a lot of young players, not a lot of new guys that weren't impact players. Now I feel like with some of the moves they've made, they're positioned to where in the middle, I don't think there's any studs in the middle, Trev. And last year, I think they thought they had a couple studs, and they didn't. But what you have is you're kind of doing what Notre Dame has done in recent years, where, I mean, Riley Mills is a stud, but at least he wasn't 24. 23 was good. 25, they didn't have any studs, but they could just throw waves of good football players at you. And that's what Texas has got right now, and they're big football players. And you've got a really athletic linebacker core. You're turning them loose. Obviously, Rasheem Biles is a guy that you and I are both very high on as a player. And like you said, you're protecting your secondary a little bit. Because if you're going to sit back and play zone and make our guys cover all day as a defensive coordinator, you're going to struggle because you just don't have the same talent at DB that you had 2 years ago when you made your playoff run. So build around your offense. Your offense is going to be the key, and it just seems like things are going pretty well. And I'm a lot more confident in Arch Manning than I was before. But like their running back room last year was good. We talked about it. It was a little overrated. They were good players, but they weren't big-time players. This is a much better running back room as well, with Hollywood Smothers, Raleek Brown, James Simon. This is a very talented football team. They're, as we said when we did our ranking, this is one of the most 5 talented rosters in college football. And it sounds like a couple of the question mark positions are at least on the verge of getting answered. And I think that's also true at Oklahoma. We'll talk briefly about them because we did talk about them a little bit earlier. But the big storyline coming out of spring is John Mateer healthy? Sounds like he was throwing the ball. I've seen some video clips of them from the spring. The ball's jumping out of his hand better than it was last season. He's looking more confident. Him and Isaac Satanga obviously have a great connection. The offensive line looks good. Their running backs are back. The defensive line returned some very good players, lost some very good players. And then also just recently, Owen Heineke was ruled eligible by a local court. So at least for now, he's eligible to play again. But it's the excitement that people seem to have. And now these are people, like, obviously we need to see it for ourselves. But when I read some of these reports, it's like, it's not the homer sites and the homer writers, but it's from people that were concerned about the O-line and last year that are now like, hey, it looks a lot better now. You know, you got the transfer from Arkansas, the big tall tackle. You got him in. He's supposedly had a good spring as he transitioned to the starting lineup for them. So it sounds like OU has had a good offseason where it mattered, and that's in the trenches. And to me, that and John Mateer's health is going to be the key to Oklahoma being a team that I actually think is going to be a lot better than they were last year. I don't think they're a title contender yet, but I think they're like, they earned the playoff berth last year based on their paper resume, but neither of us felt they were actually a top 10 team. I think they can be this year, like legitimately get in the postseason and win a game or two. And I feel a lot better about that after seeing some of the things I've seen with, you know, different clips and video stuff, and then some of the stuff we've read from the local beat writers. So I'm encouraged with what I've seen from Oklahoma so far, Trev. They're a team that I definitely like coming out of the spring.
Yeah, man, they have all the ingredients to be a good team to make a push in the playoffs as well. And I think they're following along with the identity of what Brett Venables wants them to be. I mean, when he was at his peak as a defensive coordinator, it was built around having what? An insane defensive line. And offensively, when you're at a school like Oklahoma playing in a division like the SEC, you need to be stout in the offensive trenches as well. And I think he has the recipe for both. The biggest question for them going into it was, I agree with you, John Mateer's health. And then the other piece of that too was, you know, can he finally break the cycle of going back and forth between 6-7 or 10-3, which is just a crazy up and down for him. And I think what he's doing down in Norman, I think it's looking real promising that he's going to be able to break that streak. But is not one of the only teams in the SEC that we're high on coming out of this. I thought Auburn had a really good spring as well. And this has been a team that, Brian, you and I have not been shy about being kind of on that hype train. You know, we've been real big on riding the Auburn train. Now, not that we think they're going to make the playoffs or win the SEC or compete for the national title, but they're a team that I'm keeping my eye on, and they're a dark horse. A couple of weeks ago, I predicted them to beat Alabama in the Iron Bowl this year. Thought that's an upset alert watch that we should be keeping our eye on. But talked a lot about Byron Brown coming over from USF following his head coach. But here's the thing that promised me about Auburn's ascension. It's what they were doing on defense. We talk about, you know, what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball, all the transfers that they're coming over from USF and being led by Byron Brown. Jeremiah Cobb comes back at running back. But their defense was somewhat of a question mark of what that was going to look like. And that was the side of the ball that was able to have some continuity. You know, out of the 11 starters on offense and defense, 8 of them are going to be transfer portal players on offense. It's going to be very South Florida heavy. Defense, it's literally a polar opposite conversation. Right now, they're going to have 3 projected starters on defense that weren't on Auburn last year. The rest is all returners. The defense was the big winners on that side of the ball. Now, everything that I've read is that on the scoreboard, the offense won their spring game because of how the point system went and all those other things. But watching the game, the defense came away the victors. They picked off the Auburn quarterbacks 5 times. Now, again, like with anything, you can go through and look at that. If Byron Brown isn't what we thought he was going to be, or, you know, Tristan Tia, the backup, is not what we thought he was going to be. But I don't think it was that case at all. I think this is a defense that's flying around and making plays. That's how I look at it. It's kind of like when we talked about the first practice of fall camp last year. CJ threw like 2 interceptions, like his first 5 passes, you know, in 7-on-7. It was more so that than it was, oh gosh, Byron Brown just can't throw the football. That was a lot of the takeaways that I read. But this is a veteran defense coming back, man. A lot of experience being at Auburn. You know, you have a couple of redshirt senior transfers starting on the D-line, along with Dallas Walker IV, who comes back from last year's team. Your linebacking core is completely made up of Auburn players from the 2025 team. And outside of one guy, your secondary remained intact as well. Caleb Harris comes back, Champ Anthony. So a lot of players that were a part of Auburn's roster last year. One of the reasons why I like them so much is I talked about how if they're going to go out and win games, I might have to start winning some like 44-38 and 35-34. But their defense is starting to turn around, man.
Yeah, I like this Auburn team. And I think the South Florida push is going to do for them similar to what we saw from Indiana in 2024. with their offense. Bringing over Keelan Black, bringing over Garrett Surratt, bringing over those guys that played for him at James Madison. I think we're going to see a similar thing here with that. Two of your top receivers from South Florida came over. Your top running back came over, on top of getting a transfer from Baylor who had 1,000 yards 2 years ago, and Jeremiah Cobb comes back, who's a pretty darn good running back himself. And then of course you've got Byron Brown. So like Auburn, and it sounds like that there's been buy-in to Alex Golesh so far. That's a big thing for me, Trev. It doesn't sound like there's a lot of, forget this guy, came from G5, listen to this guy. It sounds like there's been some buy-in so far, which is why they're a team I like. And here's a team that I'm a lot higher on coming out of the spring, Trevor, than I was going into the spring. And this is going to surprise some people because I haven't been very high on this team in the past. I'm higher on Georgia going into this year than I was coming into the spring. And I'm trying to evaluate just how much higher I am on Georgia. The big key, I think your offensive line has started to settle in. That's still a big question mark for me, but I think it started to settle in. I think Eugene Green is going to do okay at left tackle. The run game kind of really got going during the spring a little bit. I think the running backs are ready to take off. But as I watch the defense and the more I see this defense, the more I read about this defense, I think this secondary is every bit as good as you and I thought it could be, Trev. And it sounds like it settled just how I thought it needed to in a perfect situation for this secondary to really take off. DeMello Jones had a good spring. KJ Bolden's a stud. You've got the two safeties, Dinkins and Barnes. It's like, who's going to be safety, who's going to be star, but they're both going to start. I think they're in a position where this Georgia team could end up being really good again if Mike Bobo can figure it out. That's going to be the big thing. But I think they're more built now to be successful with him. Like, this is an offense that's geared to be more successful with him. And I think the receiving corps had a nice spring. Taylon Taylor from the Illinois kid that Notre Dame wanted, he's had a really good spring. Obviously, you have Landon Humphrey. You've got some players there, Trev, that could be all right. So I'm actually higher on Georgia than I was going in, assuming Mike Bobo doesn't serve as a roadblock for this program. I wasn't as high on Georgia coming in. And Isaiah Canyon is a big part of it, but he was a little banged up this spring. He did some nice things, but we know what he can do. We've seen him in this stage. And I think he's more of what they need, that vertical guy. He's not a big volume guy, but he can stretch the field, win contested catches. I just think this team is better suited and better built to win with the system that they're trying to win with than they have been in recent years. Can they continue this for perpetuity? We'll find out, because I don't love the recruiting they've done quite as much as they have. But Georgia was a team that we said, hey, it's hard not to predict them to win the SEC because they just do it every year, even though I don't like them. I'm a little bit more of, I think Georgia can win it because of what they're doing more than I was coming into the spring. So I know that's probably going to surprise some people, because I've been calling for Georgia's demise the last couple of years. And in a lot of ways, Trev, we've seen it. I never said they're going to fall off a cliff, but 0 in the postseason, don't look as good as they have in the past, not producing the same level of top 10 NFL draft picks they've done in the past. I actually am higher on this Georgia team right now than I was when spring started.
Yeah, they're a team that's impressed me. And one of the things that I like about it, you guys know I'm a sucker for continuity. And Georgia might be arguably the least reliant team on the transfer portal in all of college football. Honestly, when you go and you look at their 2D across the board on offense and defense, they might rely on 2 starters combined on offense and defense. Isaiah Canyon at receiver on offense, and then Jamar Riddle or Khalil Barnes at that safety to star position, what you were talking about. But yeah, man, I'm real interested to see what Georgia's going to do this year. Heard really great things about Ellis Robinson coming out of this offseason. He is going to be that in that next generation of cornerbacks that we talked about. But man, I get it. Georgia's
got to be more consistent. He's got to be more consistent. And so then I'm reading some different things coming out of the spring about how he's performing. And then you ask yourself, okay, are they doing that because he's better, or are the receivers not testing him? And I'm kind of leaning towards the side of he's really turning his immense potential into more consistent play is where I'm leaning towards. So that's a big one for them. Him and DeMello Jones at corner is going to be I think they're probably their best corner tandem since, it might even be since 2019 when they had Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell. Might even be best since then. but it's going to be a lot better. And you've got to be built the way they're built on offense, because you don't want to ask Gunnar Stockton to put a team on his shoulders and carry him. You want him to just be that game manager that makes some plays, the gritty kid, the tough kid, like kind of like what Jake Fromm was. Built different skill set, but the kind of leader, the kind of player, he's not going to blow you away with great talent. He's not going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick, but man, he just wins a lot of flipping football games. But you have to have the right team built around him. And I like the makeup of this team built around him more than I have the last 2 years, or at least I should say last year when he was a starting quarterback. And I like the team overall more than I did 2 years ago. So that's a very interesting one. Very interesting one. So like the Bulldogs. Trev, let's talk about some teams that we're not as high on, some teams that we have a lot more questions about. And we're going to start off with a team that I know you've had major question marks about for a while now, and that's the old Crimson Tide down in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, Alabama's an interesting one to crack because I've been riding the train hard that quarterback play for them is going to be elevated. But outside of the quarterback position, I have some questions about outside of quarterback and their secondary. I have questions about Alabama. I do, and watching their spring game didn't really settle down a lot of my questions either. First and foremost, this just doesn't look like an SEC offensive line. People talk about SEC size, SEC talent. This is more of a Pac-12 looking offensive line that Kalen DeBoer has put together, more so than what he inherited when he came in. Is that going to be a benefit to him now that he has all 11 personnel to run the style of offense that he wants to? Maybe. I have questions about them at linebacker. Is QB Reese and Caden Jones two guys that combined for 100 snaps last year, ready to step in and do an overhaul from the starters from last year? I don't know the answers to those questions. You've lost some important pieces on the defensive line. I think Yanze Pierre is going to be a good player for them. Devin Tompkins coming over, I think, is going to be a good player for them. But overall talent, you could argue, took a step back, losing, the two players they lost to Alabama, losing Keon Keeley to Notre Dame. The question that I have for them that we talked about in the offseason was, once again, we said this going into the 2025 season, that, some of their losses might be addition by subtraction because they're not bought into the culture. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about that again going now into the 2026 season. But at what point do they kind of cross that threshold of okay, now you've lost a lot of talent? I still think that there's talent remaining. I don't want to paint this picture that the roster's depleted. But the biggest question I have coming out for the spring for Alabama is I look at that roster and I just don't think that they're as talented, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's important, Trev, because we don't think they're coached incredibly well on defense. And so if you can't get by with the talent, you can overcome poor coaching with big-time players, that's a problem. Yeah. I think they should, in theory, be a more disciplined team this year. But I think part of their lack of discipline comes from the D coordinator and the coaching staff. I think that's a big part of it. And then the other concern I have offensively, Trevor, is I had convinced myself wrongly that you don't hire these new offensive line coaches and you don't do this, you don't do that if you're just not going to run the football. And it sounds, from what I could see and what I saw in the spring game, that's still a major question mark. And I just don't know that Kalen DeBoer has learned his lesson. Now, we could be wrong. It's the spring. We don't overact. But my buzz about Alabama and what they're going to be this year took a little bit of it got tamped down a little bit the more I read and the more I saw from Alabama. It sounds like he's just kind of, this is who we are. We're going to sink or swim doing this. And that could change. And it's going to have to change if they're going to want to get back to being what they can be, which is a team that can not only get in the playoffs, but do damage in the playoffs. He's going to have to get his head out of his you-know-what and be like, look, man, it's about building around the talent you have and realizing you can't be that at Alabama, or shouldn't. But that team I'm not as high on. And same with Ole Miss, Trev. I won't need to talk a whole lot about Ole Miss, but I'm as not sold on them now as I was going into the spring. I just think there's going to be a big drop-off in talent on the sideline and on the field. And nothing that I saw this spring kind of told me that I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, Trinidad Chambliss's return kind of overshadowed some of the other holes that roster has, in my opinion. And I understand why you're excited about it. I understand why Ole Miss fans are excited about the return of Trinidad Chambliss, but you need more than just a really good, fun, talented, experienced quarterback to win college football playoff games. I didn't know what it was going to look like now that Pete Golden was taking over the reins and kind of not just driving the bus that Lane Kiffin had put together. And everything that I've seen in the spring has not instilled confidence in me. That's like, oh yeah, no, now this is his team. He's ready to go. I'm with you. The next team on that list for me, Brian, we talked about already too, is Texas A&M. The biggest question that I have about them is in the trenches. I don't want to harp on it because we talked about it before, but that's going to be either the bend or break moment for Mike Elko. That's either going to be his meal ticket into the playoffs, or it's going to be what keeps him out of it. Because like what we've learned is Marcel Reed is not a quarterback that can put the team on his back and make some sort of run. He's not going to be that guy for them. What he is an athletic, sometimes playmaking quarterback that still has some inaccuracies as a passer. I think he has issues processing, and he's not going to have that big veteran offensive line to have anymore. So that's my issue with Texas A&M, and so far through the spring, that question hasn't been answered.
Agree, and I don't know that it's going to be, honestly, Trevor. It's a potential longer lasting concern, and that's why we think that A&M is going to take a bit of a step back this year. But I just feel like the way that he's building the program overall, if you can get past the step back and look at the direction they're going with recruiting and different things like that, I think they're heading in the right direction. It's just sometimes you got to take a step back before you can take 2 steps forward. And that's basically what's going on with A&M this offseason in the trenches. If they can figure it out sooner, then, hey, maybe it'll be a little bit of a different story, and that's going to be key. And then the final team for me, Trevor, is the Tennessee Volunteers. It's interesting. I'm actually a lot higher on Tennessee than maybe I thought I was going to be coming into the offseason. There's a lot about this team I like. I really do. I think they've got talented running backs. Deshaun Bishop was a 1,000-yard rusher last year. You look at their wide receivers. I think Mike Matthews is in position to maybe be a bit of a breakout player for them. They got Tristan Keys coming in, who's a 5-star freshman. You got Braylon Staley. Rodarius Jackson has got some ability. Offensive line, tight ends, they're solid at tight end. Offensive line-wise, you got David Sanders taking over at left tackle. You got Sam Pendleton coming back, Wendell Moe. I really like the offense. And then defensively, when you look at you've got your defensive line, there's been some issues with Chaz Coleman. He hasn't been practicing, so I don't know what's going on with him. Well, I kind of have an idea, but I don't know that it's out there. But you've got David Hobbs, you've got Xavier Gilliam, you got from Penn State. You've got, I don't know that there's no James Pierce, there's no elite player, but I just like they've got waves of good football players on their defensive line. That's my one question mark still on defense, is how good will their line be? Their linebacking core is going to be outstanding. Amari Campbell, Arian Carter, Edwin Spillman, love their linebacker room. And I think their secondary is going to be okay despite losing 2 potential first-round draft picks. Maybe they're not quite as talented as corner, but I think their safety room is going to be pretty good. They're still solid at corner, and they went out and got Kai and Lee out of the portal from Auburn. I really like this team. I really do. The big question for Tennessee is going to be quarterback. If their quarterback play is good, I think Tennessee is going to be a dangerous football team this year. If it's not, then they're going to struggle and be 7-5, 8-4 at best. But I like where things are trending with Tennessee from what I've seen from them this spring. They're a team that I think is on the rise. The problem is they've got 2 huge question marks that could keep this team from reaching their potential. And that's the thing, is Trev, it's you just said a lot of good things about Tennessee. Isn't this the teams you have questions about category? Yeah, that's the whole point. There's a lot to like about Tennessee, but those 2 big question marks, quarterback and defensive line, are a potential SEC contender, could go 7-5, 8-4. And that's why they're a big question mark for me. I don't feel great about why they don't have a starting quarterback yet, if I'm being honest with you. And that still leaves me with that could be a problem, because we've seen Josh Heupel. If he doesn't have a quarterback that can, He needs one of two things. He's one with a big-time quarterback or a complete shutdown defense that he had once. And I think that was a bit of an anomaly so far for him at Tennessee. But they've really primarily needed a really high-octane offense, and I don't know if they're going to be able to have that with the quarterbacks they have right now. So that's why, despite loving a lot about that roster, that quarterback still has me majorly concerned right now.
That's why I'm glad that you put them as a question mark, because that's kind of Josh Heupel's MO, is he lives and dies by and large by the performance of his quarterbacks. Nico didn't pan out. They had an early exit in the college football playoffs. I had some reservations about Joey Aguilar coming up from that level and going from Appalachian State to Tennessee. I thought he was going to be a good player, but I thought overall as a team they were going to go 8-4. And then last year at the end of the regular season, they went 8-4. And they lost to every ranked opponent, every quality opponent that they played that year. So it's just Josh Heupel teams live and die by the performance of the quarterback. I'm with you. That's going to be a question with Tennessee down in Knoxville until he answers it. Tennessee's season is going to be on the shoulders of who wins this quarterback battle. I'm with you. They're a question for sure.
Yep. So that's kind of our teams we have questions about, Trev. We did it a super chat from Charlie Weiss's last belt loop that we'll bring up before we get out of here.
Do you think Mayer could be on the move during the draft? Where do you see Eli landing? And do you guys see any Notre Dame guys being surprisingly drafted? Thanks, IB.
Yeah, I don't know about Michael Mayer. I'm not locked in enough to the offseason to know who might get dealt from a player standpoint. Because a lot of times there's players traded, during the draft. If you're looking for some picks or something like that, it's possible that they're dangling him. I think you kind of, with a guy like Michael Mayer, you probably let the draft play itself out a little bit, at least day 1 and day 2, and see who maybe does or doesn't get a guy. But honestly, if I'm able to trade Michael Mayer for draft picks, I'm not trading him for 26 draft picks. I'm trying to get draft picks for next year. So see who misses out on a draft pick, who misses out on tight end that needed one in the draft. Hey, we got Michael Mayer, and try to get a mid to late round pick for next year is how I would go with that, if they're looking to do that at all. Where did I see Eli Raridan landing, Trev? I think from what we've seen on mock drafts, rounds 4 or 5, that makes sense to me. There's a lot of good film. I could see some team falling in love with him late 3rd round if there's a bit of an early run on tight ends. But I think most likely with some of the combination of unique athleticism for his size and then some of and good production and some big moments. I mean, his 2 best games statistically were Texas A&M. 2 of his 3 best games statistically were Texas A&M and Miami.
Yeah.
And he had some big plays, and then he also had a 100-yard performance against NC State where, like, if he could have done that more consistently, he's a early round 2 pick. It's just that inconsistency that leads me to believe, that he's probably an early day 3 guy. But I could see some team falling in love with him and taking him later in the draft. Trev, guys, surprising. I think that, Charlie, we talked about that a little bit early. It's the defensive players for us. It's Devontae Smith. It's Jared Dawson. It's Gabriel Rubio. And then the one offensive player is Will Pauling. Like, does some team fall in love with one of those guys? Does somebody that needs a special teams player look at Junior Chialamaka or Jalen Stroman, as Trev mentioned earlier, or Will Pauling and say, hey, that guy can help us on special teams? Does some team in desperate need of beef up front say, yeah, Gabriel Rubio's got an injury history, but man, the tape is good the last 2 years. Like, when he's healthy, the tape is really good. Does Jared Dawson get a role? Get somebody to fall in love with him for his pass rushing ability that he proved at Louisville, and then the improved run defense he showed at Notre Dame this past year. I am not predicting it because I'm not a draft expert, but I could see maybe Notre Dame being a team that had a couple more guys drafted than a lot of people think. Maybe getting up to 7 or 8 guys. It's possible. I'm not predicting it, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah, there's definitely some good candidates for a surprise draft. If I had to put money on somebody, I'd probably say somebody like Jared Dawson. I doubt Michael Mayer is going to be on the move for the draft. I mean, and if he is, he's going to go for like a 6th or 7th rounder. I mean, Michael Pittman went for like a 6th or 7th rounder. Yeah. He was a starting boundary receiver. I love Michael Mayer.
Which I think in a big draft class is great. In a bad draft class is useless. Yeah, that's why I'd say try to get something for next year, because then, to your point, Trev, if you want to maybe get a pick a round higher, find the desperate team. Teams aren't desperate till after the draft. for current NFL players. They're desperate for draft picks right now, but find that team that really needed a tight end. And as the owner of the or maybe it was the president of the Seahawks said in draft day, fleece them, yeah, that's why I think you wait till after the draft and get somebody for next year, because like a 6th-round draft pick next year may get you something if it's the kind of draft class we think it could be. It's going to get you something a lot more than a guy this year, But yeah, you're not going to get a 2nd-round draft pick from Michael Mayer. The only way you get a 2nd-round pick is if he had lived up to his draft, draft status. But unfortunately, Michael Mayer hasn't, for whatever reason, not saying why or whatever, I couldn't tell you. He just hasn't produced like you hoped he would from where he was drafted, and you're just not going to get a high pick for that. You just want somebody to eat his salary and give us a pick, a late round pick next year.
Yeah. Well, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, the guys go live tonight on IB Nation Sports Beat. They're also talking NFL draft. Then they also had an interesting interview with Steve Berline, so you're not going to want to miss tonight's show. Goes live here in a little bit less than an hour at 5:05. Brian and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for the Friday free-for-all mailbag, so make sure you guys bring your questions. I'm sure we'll have NFL draft questions after the first round, college football topics, and then obviously it's the day before Notre Dame kicks off their 95th annual Blue-Gold Game. So I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun questions tomorrow. On your way out of this show, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at irishbreakdown.com. Have a fun and wonderful evening. Enjoy the NFL draft, at least the first round of it tonight. And we'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.